Welcome, everybody. I am calling to order the meeting of the Santa Barbara Unified School Board on October 13th, 2020. It is now just 6:33, and I welcome everybody who's joining us, and of course to Superintendent Maldonado and the cabinet that I can see here, and those that I can't, but who are joining us on the Zoom meeting. So with that, I will turn it to interpretation, which I should have done right off the bat. So Ms. Rubalcaba, if you can take it away, that'd be great.
Thank you, President Capps. I will give this announcement in both English and Spanish. Buenas tardes, voy a dar este anuncio en inglés y en español. In order to provide language access, we will be providing simultaneous bidirectional interpretation in English and Spanish. If you are bilingual, you don't have to click anything. If you are not bilingual in English and Spanish, you will have to select your language in order to hear the interpretation. If you're on a laptop or desktop, you will see a globe icon that says interpretation at the bottom right of your screen. Please click on the globe now and select English. If you're on an iPad or a phone, locate the three-dot menu and select language interpretation, then select English and click done. When it's your turn to speak, please remember to be loud and clear and speak at a moderate pace. Thank you. Buenas tardes. Esta reunión contará con interpretación simultánea bidireccional en inglés y en español. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada. Si usted no es bilingüe, tendrá que elegir su idioma para escuchar la interpretación. Si está usando una computadora, verá un icono en la parte inferior de su pantalla a la derecha en forma de globo que dice interpretación. Haga clic ahí ahora y seleccione español. Si está usando un iPad o su teléfono, localice el menú de 3 puntos, haga clic en interpretación de idiomas y elija español y aceptar. Cuando sea su turno de hablar, por favor recuerde hablar con voz fuerte y clara y a un paso moderado. Gracias. Are there any questions with regards to interpretation? If not, we will go ahead and put the instructions on the chat so that everybody can see them. And now I will ask the host to assign me as interpreter number 2, and we may begin. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Now I will turn it over to Superintendent Maldonado to lead us all in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Board President Capps. Good evening, parents, families, community members who are joining us this evening. Buenas noches a todos los que se han reunido con nosotros. Put your we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance now. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, with that, I get to report out. There was one action item taken in closed session. I'm just reading the correct language. In closed session, the board took action to approve/ratify the September 16th, 2020 final settlement agreement and general release between parents and district and student versus Santa Barbara Unified School District Special Education Due Process case, pursuant to which the district has agreed to fund and provide educational services to the student, and the student's parents have agreed to release claims against the district in exchange for educational services as specified in the agreement. The motion was made by Ms. Ford and seconded by Ms. Sims-Moten, and the vote was unanimous. And that was it for our closed session. And so now I turn it back over to the Superintendent Maldonado, for your report.
Thank you once again. And I want to bring to the board a couple of updates. We know we have an agenda this evening that's pressing for us to make some decisions as we move forward in this pandemic. For today's superintendent report, I wanted to bring an update on the work with the small cohorts, the work with athletics, and also freshly made video for our health and safety measures that have been taking place in these last couple of weeks. I want to thank the executive cabinet members. I want to thank our school principals. We are working and pivoting as fast as we can as we get fresh information as things change We are learning to lead with adaptability and flexibility. So with that, I'd like to start with Dr. Fran Wagenek to give us a quick update on how small cohorts are working out. Dr. Wagenek?
All right. I am unable to see the screen at this moment. That is my problem, but I will start talking in hopes that the screen appears for me. So we were able to open small cohorts over the last 3 weeks, and all of our schools have a minimum of 2 cohorts running, some as many as 7 cohorts. And that's, we started originally with our small cohorts for students with mod to severe disabilities, and then have built up from there, adding additional cohorts for students with disabilities, but also inviting other students onto campus with acute needs into our academic learning centers. And I just saw a fantastic photo from San Marcos High School of some of our emerging multilingual students, our newcomer students who have most recently come to the country, lined up for their scanning to make sure that they're safe to come onto campus, and they had smiles on their faces. So it was great to see them at San Marcos High School in front of the Thunder Hut, ready to engage in the small learning cohorts. So we're happy with the progress that's being made with those. They haven't come without challenges, especially around staffing, but we are meeting those challenges head on and intend to continuing to work to build those.
Thank you, Dr. Wagenek. And now I'd like to ask Ms. Sean Carey to give us an update on.
Thank you, Superintendent Maldonado. Good evening, board. Yes, I'm pleased to report that we have begun phase 2 reopening for our fall sports just last week. That brings us to a total of 19 sports teams across our 3 large high schools, over 50 coaches, and over 700 student athletes who are participating in sports activities with equipment now in phase 2, but it's equipment that is not shared. So just individually. And continuing to work on conditioning and other drills. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to see some of the highlights and the footage that really helps to see the visuals associated with some of that activity taking place, and to hear from our staff, our athletic staff. We are looking to begin phase 1 reopening for spring sports later this month on October 26th. And provided all continues to go well, as we have seen happen so far, we will be shifting to phase 2 within a couple of weeks after that for spring sports. CIF, just as a reminder for folks, CIF has designated which sports this year fall into the fall and spring seasons, and has also designated athletic contest dates. But we are watching local conditions and waiting to see what further guidance we will get. The next slide is just a clarification of which sports have been designated this particular year and uniquely as fall sports and spring sports.
Thank you, Ms. Carey. And again, board members, I want to remind us, as we continue to evolve during this pandemic, some decisions are made at the local level and some decisions are made for us at a higher level, and this is one of them. So I know that many parents have expressed concern about why we can do this and not other extracurricular activities. So we're working through those different questions and ways that we can bring people back as our county's transmission rate is lowering. Our next slide, I'm going to ask Brian. I've been communicating to parents. I've been writing letters to parents about our plans. One of the things that I've expressed to parents is our preparedness around health and safety, and that each principal will be reaching out to each school community with explicit plans for their sites around health and safety and continuity of learning. So with that, I'd like to ask you to take a look at this brand new video that we are sharing with you for the first time tonight. We will be sharing this in each school community by our principals as well. Take a look.
Hi, I'm Steve Vizzolini, Director of Facilities and Modernization for Santa Barbara Unified School District. I wanted to give our families an overview of how we prepared our campuses to welcome back our students and staff as safely as possible. I have a team of 100 employees at 17 campuses, ensuring that all guidelines required by county and state public health officials are in place and being followed. Over the summer, custodial staff were all trained in the safe use of cleaning and disinfecting products. They were also equipped with the personal protective equipment, or PPE, necessary to perform the work safely, and were trained how to use it. When it comes to cleaning our facilities, my custodial teams are using a disinfecting product by Waxy Sanitary Supply called Solstice 730 HP Disinfectant Cleaner. The active ingredient is hydrogen peroxide at 4.25%. It is mixed with water in a dilution station to ensure proper mixing and effectiveness, and is applied in a mist from a backpack sprayer. Custodians will be cleaning restrooms every night and during the day as often as practicable. There will be a log posted for each restroom that indicates each time it was cleaned. Just like our restrooms, every classroom will be disinfected every night. In the event we have a room become infected, we will quarantine the room and follow the guidelines of county public health. To ensure students have access to places to wash their hands, 84 hand washing stations will be distributed beginning this week. In addition, every classroom and office area has touchless hand sanitizer dispensers installed. To ensure proper social distancing, we are making sure that tape, floor signs, and A-frame signs have been provided that give clear visual directions to our students, and all staff members are reinforcing the correct protocols and behaviors. The district has provided more than 90,000 face shields and 95,000 washable masks for staff and students, and backup disposable masks to provide for the inevitable lost mask. Buckets of wipes are provided for every classroom. The active ingredient is ethyl alcohol at 60%, which is effective in killing the coronavirus. In addition to face shields, plexiglass shields are provided for staff who have public-facing positions. The most effective means of ventilating spaces is for doors and windows to remain open during the school day, so staff will make that a priority each morning. Additional ventilation will be provided by heating and ventilating equipment having their fans run continuously during the day. These units will bring in air from outside that will dilute the air in the classroom. Tents for outdoor use are being manufactured and are due to arrive late October. Smaller tents are already in use by our after-school and early education programs. We are conducting surveillance COVID testing of our staff, one of the systems that needed to be in place to bring our students back to campus. We've tested about 1,250 staff so far. I know many of our parents have questions about how transportation will work once we return to school. So here are some guidelines. Students will fill the vehicle from back to front. School buses will be seated with one student or family member per seat. Buses will be cleaned and sanitized between routes and when different students are seated on the bus. Students and bus drivers self-screen prior to arriving at the bus, and students and drivers will be required to wear face coverings. In closing, Santa Barbara Unified has been working diligently since March to be sure that our campuses are safe for when students and staff return for in-person learning.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. If you can get us off the, thank you. Back to all the faces. It's always helpful. So that concludes my superintendent's report on three of many of the things that we have been working on in the last couple of weeks as we get prepared and as we continue to ensure the safety of all staff and students in Santa Barbara Unified. Thank you, Board President Capps.
Thank you, Superintendent, and to the team. I love the videos. Okay, then I'll move now to item 6, which is board comments and correspondence. I'll turn it over to my colleagues on the board for any comments or correspondence they'd like to share with the public. Ms. Ford.
Thank you. Well, just a few things. First of all, after our last board meeting, I attended, I think it was September 23rd, the meeting of La Cumbre Junior High's back to school night, and it was really well organized. It was an evening filled with enthusiasm and information and excitement about this year. So congratulations to Principal Brock, his leadership team, and the entire staff. I also, since our last board meeting, attended our monthly meeting of the Santa Barbara County Executive Board, and we discussed many, many topics truly from each of the districts in our county about so many issues that we all have in common. We discussed tech and access issues, enrollment declines, protocols for cleaning and social distancing, pluses and minuses of hybrid, teacher fears and concerns, outdoor classrooms, and community surveys. So I know these all sound very familiar to you. Also in these meetings, Dr. Susan Salcido, our county superintendent, does a really great job of keeping us informed on the latest information from the state and our own county public health. And we also learned a little bit about the new health metric, and I can't say I'm an expert about it, so I'm looking forward to learning more. And finally, I just wanted to tell my colleagues on the board that I read a book that really changed the way I think about things, written by Daniel Pink. It's one of his newest books. And the subtitle, it's titled When, but the subtitle is The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. And it was a real eye-opener for me, especially because of all of the issues we're addressing right now. And he asserts in this book, which is really interesting with lots of data and examples, that even when we often discuss what we should be doing and what is best, the most powerful decision we actually make is when we do it, and the best times of the day, week, year, and month. So it really changed my perspective on decision-making, and I recommend it to everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Appreciate that. Book tip. Okay, Ms. Sims-Moten, I see your hand.
Yeah. Hey, it actually was unmuted and you didn't have to tell me, right? So getting better at this. So good evening, everyone, to on the screen and those out in the community and online with us this evening. And I have a couple things I want to share as well. While I wasn't able to attend the Santa Barbara Ed Foundation meeting, our monthly meeting, because I had a conflict, I just want to always acknowledge the work and support that they do for our district and for our students with equipment, certain grants to our teachers. And so I just want to make sure that we continue to keep them and acknowledge them for the work that they're doing constantly year round, making sure that our students have what they need, certainly also with regards to supporting our teachers as well. So I want to share my appreciation with that. And then secondly, I am really proud and pleased to announce I had the opportunity to co-host a local event that happens annually, and that's the Bread and Roses event, sponsored by the Santa Barbara Fund for Santa Barbara. And they are a nonprofit community foundation that supports grassroots organizations working for social, economic, environmental, and political change in Santa Barbara community. And every year they have a large fundraiser, which is called Bread and Roses. If you've been here in this community long enough, you know that that's there. It's not only a fundraiser, but it's actually a celebration of community getting together and watching the sunset through Summerland. And you can go on that website if you want to know more about that. But I'm bringing a piece. They had a first time award because they also have a youth making change level there that they support new young leaders, and they develop them to become leaders in our community. And so they work with them, and they're there every year, and they start to make funding decisions about youth activities that are going on in our community. So I'm proud and pleased to announce for the first time, there was what they call a Firebrand Award given to emerging progressive community leaders for their social change work in our community. And this year, for the first time award, I was happy to be able to announce two Santa Barbara Unified School District students, Talia Hamilton and Shakir Ahmad, and they were selected for their leadership, and which included their recent organizing work for the Black Lives Matter and actions. And so this is really huge because they were chosen because they exemplify the importance of young people at the center of social change movements. And we all know the work that they've done and organized the march in June and led to those demands coming to the district. So I want to say congratulations to them, very proud of them. And they stand again, what we're producing in terms of Santa Barbara Unified School District, always making sure that our students are prepared and they get to see that in the work that they're doing in the community. So again, I want to congratulate Talia and Shakir, and I know that they're going to continue to do great, and they're senior and junior at San Marcos High. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Sims-Moton. Dr. Reed.
Yeah, thank you. And that's wonderful news, Ms. Sims-Moton. Thanks for sharing that. And congratulations to Talia and Shakir for that amazing award. And student advocacy, I just think is so crucial and important. And so thank you for bringing that forward. I just wanted to also announce that I had the opportunity to attend the another event, Back to School, Santa Barbara High's event. And I wanted to really commend Ms. Simmons for her terrific job, a very well orchestrated production. I think these are all really productions. We've been involved in productions from these different schools, and I just want to say that I know a lot of work goes into it, and a lot of work from the staff, but just the involvement of students and administrators. And so I just want to acknowledge the great work that went on in all of the back to school nights. I also wanted to just say that I had the opportunity to attend the Ethnic Studies Forum, which I know members of the board also attended. But I just wanted to highlight that the passing of the Ethnic Studies high school requirement, it's been a highlight for me as a board member. And I'm really excited that we as a district are really looking at this and really wanting to be transparent as we move forward. That it means finally that students of a different race, ethnicity, gender difference, or of an indigenous population have an opportunity to see themselves and their experiences, their histories, their perspectives mirrored in the curriculum, and that in turn promotes student engagement, achievement, and inclusion. And I just want to say that I'm excited for all the work that was shared, all of the information around programs that are being implemented. And I wanted to also say that I would like to see and continue to see ethnic studies being held as front and center focus for this district, that the process remains transparent, and that the community input will continue to be bolstered and robust in this process, and that it will be implemented with fidelity as a critical interdisciplinary program. So I wanted to acknowledge that as well. And finally, I just wanted to say too, and I know I'll have an opportunity later, but what I appreciate on this board is the opportunity to hear from the community. And we have had ongoing emails and messages and calls and concerns, certainly today about the report that's going to be coming forward. And I want to say that I do hear and see you as educators. I hear and see you as parents. I hear and see you as students, because we heard from many, many students as well, and from staff. And that it's important that we hear from you. I appreciated hearing from all of you and continue to hear from you as we move through this fluid process and challenge that we're faced with. So I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you for informing us of what you're thinking and what your concerns are and what the positive things that are going through your mind as well. So thank you, Board President.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Ms. Munoz, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, yes, I think I'm on. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, good. Okay. Yes, I also attended the Ethnic Studies Forum on October 1st and appreciated, the student voices. This started from students and the leadership from the students expressing themselves in terms of what they've learned, what they wanted may happen in the community, their community involvement, and just discovering themselves, being able to have a place where it's safe to speak, to share their cultural knowledge of others and discovery of their own culture in a place where that conversation can happen. The dedication of the teachers at Ethics Studies, I enjoyed thoroughly all the presentations that were made and hands-on, in terms of the lessons that are taught, the books that are shared with students. I'm hoping to read several of them. And really, the importance of that. And what we're seeing start as a school district, I think, is so important for years to come. Besides that, also the dedication of the teachers within our school district with making, distance learning successful, effective, and including all the, the students, the parents. It takes a whole village to make this happen. And I have also, like as Dr. Reed said, read all of the emails and appreciated, the comments of what's going well, what we could improve on. But it's good to know that things are, that students are learning and wanting that continuation is so important to us. So yes, I know we're going to talk more about that, but just wanted to share that. And also that we, I've been reading all the emails that we receive, and the future with Zoom and the number of participants that we have tonight at this meeting is just an example of that. With the inclusion of the community, it's, we have at least 500 participants tonight, which is just amazing. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz. And I'll just add in on my correspondence. I've been trying to go to as many campuses as I can to see how things are actually working. And the videos really bring it to life for those that can't visit. But yesterday, Superintendent Maldonado and I were at La Cumbra Junior High, and I want to thank Principal Brock as well as Ed Gomez and Patty Flores for showing us around, seeing how their hybrid plans are in place, where the tents are going to be. And while we were there, of course, we stopped by the Santa Barbara Community Academy, which, thanks to Principal Sharfield's hard work, they have a cohort. There's 50 kids in a cohort, in not one cohort, but many cohorts there. And just to see how spread out they were, I counted, in one classroom, there was 6 kids. They also have an AOK childcare center. I'm sorry, they have AOK, but then they also have a childcare center for employees. So it's really just showing how resourceful these spaces are being utilized in a safe way. Also outdoor, they have so much space at La Cumbra for outdoor education. They just need more shade. And I know the tents are on their way. So thank you for the team and all the work that's going into that beautiful campus. It's just stunning every time I go to La Cumbra and to the Santa Barbara Community Academy. Also too, I just want to chime in on the ethnic studies and how good it was to see the hard work to come to fruition, to actually be talking about the curriculum and showcasing it to the community. I know the coalition has worked so hard over the years, and particularly lately, and I want to thank the teachers and thank the students who spoke. It was wonderful, and I just, again, all of the curriculum and information's on the website, so it's really important to know that that resource is front and center and transparent and ready for the public. So with that, we are literally at 7:01, and it's time to move to our board, our time certain presentation and board discussion of why there are probably 574 people on this Zoom, is to hear about plans for continuing the reopen, because the reopen is definitely started. I've seen it myself firsthand. So I will turn it back over to Superintendent Maldonado for her report along with her team.
Thank you, board members, board president Capps. I do want to acknowledge that with us today, as has been in the past couple of weeks, is Susan Klein-Rothschild from the Public Health Department. And I'd like to give her an opportunity to speak before we start our presentation on today's announcement on the county's rate of infection and where we are headed next. So if we can have Ms. Susan Klein-Rothschild begin with telling us that update.
Thank you so much for having me come and be able to speak with you a little bit about where we're at. Today, we received news from the California Department of Public Health that we are again in the red tier, which means our case rate of COVID and the positive cases is in a much better place than it was about a month ago. And that means that officially we are permitted to have children and students return to in-person learning. So that means that school boards and schools have an opportunity to make decisions now where they didn't before. There wasn't that opportunity because there was so much COVID in the community. It was too high of a risk of transmission. The risk of transmission has now decreased, so now we have an opportunity to make decisions. Now, it doesn't mean that schools will be the same. I want to make sure people know that, because before COVID, we had a very different situation. We will always have, until we have a vaccine or we don't have COVID in our community, we will always need face coverings. We need physical distance. We'll need all the cleaning and disinfecting. All of those things will need to be considered, and considered for each facility in each school. But now schools have an opportunity to make some of those decisions. And the other thing that I wanted to share, and I don't know, Superintendent Maldonado, if you would like me to share this now or later, but some of the demographic data that we learned today.
I did not include it in my presentation, Suzanne, but you're welcome to go ahead and share that.
I just would like to share briefly, today at the Board of Supervisors meeting, Dr. Do Reynoso brought some data about COVID in our community. And some of the important information, one is about what age are people in Santa Barbara County who have COVID, who have positive cases. And the largest group in terms of age group is between the ages of 20 and 29. By far more COVID cases than any. But there are COVID cases in children and student ages. 0 to 9, there are 318 cases. 10 to 19, 834. And the 20 to 29, this gives you some perspective, 2,183. And that's through the end of September. So it goes all the way up to the 70 and older age group. That's important. Something that's very important too that I know you'll want to be very aware of is, in addition to age, we know that it's not just the number of people who have COVID, but what is their course of infection and their outcomes. And although we have a population of 11% in Santa Barbara County who are over 70 years of age, 66% of the deaths in our county are people over the age of 70. So you can see how it impacts people very differently. And then the other piece that's important to really note is about the race and ethnicity of people who have COVID in our community. So Santa Barbara County in general has a Hispanic Latino population of approximately 48% and white population approximately 43%. But when it comes to COVID, there's an overrepresentation. 65% of the people who've tested positive for COVID in our community are of Hispanic Latino background. And hospitalizations, 74% are Hispanic Latino. And out of the deaths, 56%. This is really what we talk about in terms of the equity metric. We really need to keep in mind the importance of how people are impacted by this disease differently and what we can and need to do to make sure that everyone has access to the healthcare they need and to the outcomes that we all want to achieve. So those are some brief updates I wanted to bring to your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, and we'll save our questions for the end of the presentation. I wanted to thank you again for being such a great thought partner. And again, board members, please note that this information has been released today to all of us. And so as we prepare all our presentations to you, I want to acknowledge and reaffirm that we continue to learn with new information and we continue to get smarter. And so today's presentation has information that was published on Friday, and we have learned many things since Friday. So with that, I'd like to have Mr. Ross, please show our presentation.
Maldonado.
I'm sorry?
Maldonado. This is
Yeah.
Wendy. I just had one question on the metrics, and maybe you don't have that information, but are there other ethnicities that are impacted as well? Can we, if you don't have that, Susan, tonight, can you forward that to us so that we know that what the further breakdown of the whole entire county in terms of ethnicity?
The data is available.
Okay, you can get it. It will. I don't know if it's going to be presented tonight, but if maybe we can forward to us later on.
I can show the graphic. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
This again just was sent to us this morning. So let me share my screen. And this is the one you're referencing, right, Susan?
Yeah.
Can everybody see my screen? Okay, it's very difficult because now everybody's moved to the side on my side.
Right.
Question, any more questions? Is this helpful? Board Member Sims-Moton?
It is, and would you be able to send that to me as well? Or maybe you send
Yes.
that to the whole board, or maybe it's on the website. I can just get it from there.
I can forward it to everyone.
Okay, great.
As
Thank
soon
you.
as, yes. Okay, great. So again, board members, new information constantly coming our way. It's good data for us to consider all our decisions that we need to make together. So with that, Mr. Rouse, we'll go to the next slide. And let's go, everybody's aware of the drivers we're using to make our decisions. So we'll go to the next slide. Great, so give me 1 second. So, sorry, I just got thrown off by showing this part.
And I'm gonna interrupt you because I just want to, when I introduced this item, I should have explained to those who are going to speak to this item that we are now, the rhythm that we've adopted is to have a presentation and then our speakers and then board comments and questions and deliberations. So for those 31 speakers who are speaking to this item, you'll be next. Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification. Great. So board members, today we're bringing you a picture in time of our staff and families' preferences for in-person reopening. You'll have some quantitative data, some qualitative data to consider. And I want to remind you, just as we saw now, that as conditions change, data will continue to shift. We also have to remember that every data point that we see is a number, but that number represents individuals. Individuals such as a parent, a teacher, support staff member, or a student. We took a poll of all these groups, and the idea behind the poll was just to get an overall sense of what are people thinking, feeling, and experiencing in relationship to our questions. Every family and staff situation is unique. We will work with everyone to best meet their needs to the extent practicable. Our charge as a school leadership team is to decide what is best for students in a K-12 school system. We will continue to engage our families through our school site principals and communities to ensure families are given site-specific information about their health and safety protocols and how we will focus on student learning and maintain that continuity of learning. I'm asked often, when do you think we'll be back to normal school? My answer is never. And that is because the traditional school classroom is no longer a reality. It will not be for a while. COVID-19 has and will continue to change the way we live for many months and even years to come. But schools have been through similar, and not the same, but similar health crises before. We have learned to adjust and we have thrived in different conditions. We can do that again, but I really need to have everyone to work with us in community. If I have learned anything from this crisis so far, it is that our unity, creativity, collaboration, flexibility, and adaptability will be needed so that our community, and most importantly, its children, thrive. Now, I'd like to speak to you about why I'm bringing this recommendation forward to you today. I was hired to ensure that we deliver a strong, rigorous, equitable education program for the students of Santa Barbara Unified. I'm bringing you a recommendation on what is best for students. This recommendation has been made taking into account the health and safety guidance from Public Health Department, the feasibility of our facilities to house students following social distance protocols, and the staffing availability. But at the heart of it is, what do parents choose for their students at this time? I have heard from parents, teachers, community members, and continue to hear from you now. I see all the emails coming through, even as I'm speaking. I've heard from students about the fear and anxiety to return to school. It is still present. We need to work together to overcome that. Our public health department has informed us and continues to tell us that it is safe to return to in-person in the red substantial transmission tier. We announced last week that we wanted to challenge ourselves to wait until January 19th, when and if, sorry, not last week, the last meeting, to challenge ourselves to wait until January 19th, when and if we reach the gold tier or minimal transmission rate. Many of our neighboring elementary districts have begun to open, and as I consider the needs of our youngest learners, I'm convinced that they are safe to return to school with all of our health and safety precautions in place. However, I want to be clear that we cannot guarantee that a child or staff member will not catch COVID-19 because it will be irresponsible for us to make such a claim, and frankly, it is not in our control to do so. Again, public health asserts minimal risk to elementary students, and that's why they also offered an elementary waiver weeks ago, which we did not at the time take advantage of. We felt at the time that it was necessary to wait and observe those who started before us. I've been able to observe neighboring districts who have opened and they've been able to implement school in a safe way. I believe that we can do that too. We will allow parents though to have a choice and to commit to either an in-person or distance learning in the coming weeks. The poll was not the official selection of how they wanted their students to learn. It was a picture in time. They will be given another opportunity once they are given further information from our school leaders. Parents are our partners. I realize that some people will be pleased to hear we're opening and others may wish to remain at home. We will do our best to accommodate all requests. But back to the question of what is best for students. You're going to hear more about how we are moving as a system. And I want to revisit our staff recommendation at the end of this presentation, given everything I have learned since we last posted this presentation and our agenda on Friday night. Next slide, please. So as Susan Klein Rothschild has announced, we continue to be in the red or substantial transmission rate in Santa Barbara County. As school leaders, we need to balance many factors. There are 4 important factors that I need to take into account. The health and safety preparedness of all our schools and sites, the capacity of our facilities to house students in a social distancing model, the availability of staff, our teachers, our support staff, our classified staff, our maintenance, food services staff, and of course, the choices that our families will be making for either in-person learning or distance learning. Balancing all those key areas is important to our decision-making and preparation. And we need to have all of them happen in rhythm and in conjunction with each other. We can't take one away from the other as we make our decision. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Vecchio to get us started on the topic of staffing of both health, safety, preparedness, and staffing availability. Dr. Vecchio?
Thank you very much. Good evening, board members. And what you see in front of you is a slide for employee testing. And as you know, we are now on our 4th week of surveillance testing of all staff members. And to date, we've tested about 1,250 employees. And so far, we have had no positive tests return. Here you can see a breakdown of the staff who have been tested and who we have left to test. So this is our last week of testing. We will do a makeup testing the following week, probably for 1 day. And you know, while there's no positive tests yet, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Wagneck to explain what protocols are in place in the event that we ever do have a positive COVID case. Thank you.
Dr. Wagneck?
I apologize. I'd already said half of my slide. A frequently asked question these days is what happens if a student or staff member is positive for COVID-19? And the answer is that our district will collaborate with Santa Barbara County Public Health when investigating exposures in our schools and in our workspaces. Our district nurses, who are all registered nurses, have been trained and will consult with Susan Klein Rothschild to determine the next steps needed, including case investigation and contact tracing. But the key here is for us to act quickly, and we've established a 4-step protocol for what we will do when a case is reported to us. What I really want to assure our staff and families is that we will be transparent to the extent that we can and notify you anytime that you are impacted. And with that, we will going to go to our next slide. Okay, which is testing. I turn it over to Dr. Vecchio.
Actually, Dr. Wagenknecht, the next slide is our slide on health and safety, which.
Okay, thank you. That is me. Having a little trouble with my slides tonight. I apologize. So in addition to asking about the protocols for what happens if there is a case on campus, really what we're working so hard to do is to make sure that campuses are safe. So as you saw in the video tonight, we are preparing. First, I want to talk about masks, and we've gotten a lot of questions about masks. Students and staff members will be given cloth face coverings and face shields or hats. All staff and students are required to use face coverings or face shield or face shields during the day, especially when 6 feet of social distancing is not possible. Students will be reminded regularly through various methods. We'll be training students through videos and signs and teacher presentations to wear their face coverings. We encourage you, families, to also reiterate that at home. There will be exemptions that will be very rare. Staff and students who have medical conditions that prevent them from wearing a face covering will be required to get a formal exemption that is signed by a physician. But again, we expect those to be rare. Hand washing. Hand washing. Portable hand washing stations, as you saw in the video, have been acquired for all school sites. There will be schedules and processes for hand washings established at each school site. We really want to create plans. So our principals are working hard to create plans that minimize the congregating of students and staff in bathrooms. That's the primary reason for the hand washing stations. Students are going to wash or sanitize their hands before entering the classroom, before and after lunch, before and after recess, before and after entering an internal space that is not their classroom, after sneezing, coughing, or other similar actions, and other times throughout the day. Their hands will never be so clean as they will be when they return to school. Social distancing. Our principals have created plans to make recess and breaks safe for children, and a variety of steps have been taken in this regard. There will be multiple recess schedules in order to maximize social distancing. Students will be assigned specific play areas based on classroom cohorts and grade levels. And student classroom cohorts may occupy outdoor spaces together at the same time, but they have to maintain distance between their cohorts. And finally, meals will be served in classrooms or outdoors instead of within the cafeteria itself. On our buses, windows will be opened, and as it said in the video, space will be maximized between students and the driver. Students will be seated 1 per seat unless they're sitting with a family member, and they'll be seated every other row. On campuses, there will be minimized contact between students, staff, families, and the community at the beginning and end of each school day. And really, except when necessary, community visitors, including parents, will not be coming onto campus. Schools will stagger their arrival and drop-off and pickup times and the locations of those drop-offs and pickups as consistently as practicable so that they can maintain social distancing, minimize scheduling challenges, and make sure that there's an orderly arrival and drop-off. So this is one of those things that's really challenging the principals, but I've been impressed with what they've come up with for scheduling these drop-offs and pickups. Finally, schools are going to designate routes for entry and exit, using as many entrances and exits as are feasible at the school. floor stickers and signs are going to be used to indicate doors for entering and exiting. And they'll even be delineating lanes for travel within hallways. So now I'm going to turn it over to the star of tonight's video, Mr. Vizzolini, to provide additional details on cleaning and disinfecting.
Dr. We're going to move the video to the front of the meeting. So
Okay.
we're going to go ahead and move to the next slide. I'm not sure if you can see it.
No, Mr. Vizzolini was going to talk a little bit more about the cleaning and disinfecting.
Thank you.
On this slide.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent Maldonado. During the pandemic, cleaning and disinfecting has been a major focus for our custodial team. As you saw in the video, all of our custodians are trained to disinfect properly and they know how to do it safely. We've also purchased all the correct equipment to have that work done. I've also wanted to point out that our custodial teams have been actually practicing at the schools during the summer to figure out what it takes to get all this work done to make sure they can do it in the time they have available. So cleaning restrooms and classrooms takes time. So they've been actually out there practicing to see how long it takes. And I think we're in pretty good shape there. We are going to be hiring 6 more custodial floaters to help out especially in the elementary district, to make sure that we've got some people that can be moved around if we end up having somewhere where we need some help, and just to offer general support. Also wanted the board to know that the disinfecting product that we've chosen is included on the EPA list N, which is of products that are effective against COVID. We have an enormous amount of buckets of sanitizing wipes throughout the district that are made to be refillable by custodians, who have also been provided with 55-gallon drums of hand sanitizer to refill these with. So we have a good backup supply of that. And it's, as a reminder, it's an alcohol-based product over 60%, which is also EPA approved. And finally, we have also, in addition to those wipes, we have a lot of hand pumps and bottles with hand sanitizer in it. There's some in all the classrooms. There's some in common spaces. They're in offices. And in addition to that, the maintenance staff over the summer installed touchless refillable hand sanitizer dispensers in offices and all classrooms throughout the district. So we feel like our team is pretty well set up to take care of this challenge. So we're ready to go. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Jate.
Actually, it's going to stay with me.
Oh.
And Mr. Rouse will go to the slide on social distancing factor. So why hybrid? Why go to a hybrid model? Well, it really has to do with what we call the social distancing factor. Early on in COVID, 6 months ago, we were hearing things like no more than 10 to 12 students in a classroom at a time. And we were being given this number. And if we know one thing, it's what Ms. Maldonado talked about earlier, that is that information can change literally overnight, sometimes in the blink of an eye. And so what I'd like the board to consider right now is that we're really not thinking so much anymore about a set number of students in a classroom. What we're looking for is a social distancing factor of 6 feet. We really want to be able to maintain that 6 feet as much as possible. So now that we're approaching the orange, we are still in the red, but we're approaching the orange. We need to get away from the idea of a set number in a classroom and determine how many students we can have in any given space. So a classroom, a gymnasium, a cafeteria, et cetera. So here's an example of one of our schools. So in the first column on the left, we have an exemplary school pre-COVID. In that school, we had the ability to put about 23 students in a classroom. But we had plenty of space. We had the teachers. We had no social distancing needed. But the second column is today. And as we look to bring students back to school, we know that we need to create classroom seating where students can easily maintain that 6 feet of distancing. Mr. Vizzolini and his staff have provided us with square footage data. And we found that the classrooms in this school, which is similar to many other schools in the district, can accommodate 2 adults and 15 students at any given time while maintaining this social distancing. So we took the 536 students in the school and saw that, and kind of did the math. And first we eliminated the 11% of students who we estimate will not be returning to school at any time this year. They will be learning from home for the entire school year. So we took that off, and that left us with 477 students. We divided that by 15 students in a classroom, and we find that we need 32 classrooms, with which we have, but we would also need 32 teachers. So as a result, in order to make this happen, we'd have to hire 8 additional teachers at a cost of approximately $600,000 for the remaining of the school year. This is one school. Even then, the money is not really, it's a hurdle, but it's not the biggest hurdle. The bigger hurdle and the primary concern is that teachers are not available to hire, especially during this time of the year. And so we have a staffing concern there. So knowing that we would be unable to have 15 students in 32 classes because we're lacking the teachers, that leads us to the far right column, which is our hybrid model. So in the third column, you see that we solved this problem wherein half the students are on campus each day. We take the 477 students, divide that by 2, and we get more or less 239 students served by 24 teachers with an average of 10 students in each classroom. No additional teachers are needed, though we do need additional classified staff in order to provide supervision. So that is why hybrid. That is the math of hybrid. And we really wanted to make the point to lay that out for you all tonight very clearly, but also lay that out for families to understand why we're going to hybrid at this point in the game, and for as long as we need to maintain the social distancing. At this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Vecchio to share more about staffing availability.
All right, thank you, Dr. Wagneck. And as Dr. Wagneck mentioned, the hybrid model does allow us to use existing staff to implement in-person learning while also maintaining social distancing. However, I do want to bring to your attention the issue we will have to contend with in terms of staffing. We do have a process in place in HR whereby employees can indicate whether they have a medical or other circumstance that might necessitate accommodations or leaves of absences. And here you will see a breakdown of that data. For example, certificated staff shows approximately 55 teachers who have indicated a possible need for a leave of absence. And then on the classified side, you'll see 82 there. And I broke it down for you by elementary and secondary. So can we implement hybrid if this many staff members can't return to work? And so let's take first the certificated side. We do have an indication of how many families would not have their children return to school this year based on the poll that we conducted. So my preliminary analysis is that the number of teaching staff that will need leave of absences will match up fairly nicely with the number of students that may need to remain in distance learning. So we should be able to make accommodations for that staff and still use them in our models. The bigger issue, however, is the classified staff who actually provide the support services to our schools. We may, in fact, be able to use some of those for distance learning and make accommodations. But mostly, if you think about support services and what we're going to try to do at the school sites, supervision, active screening of visitors and students and staff, we really need that supervision to be available at our school sites. And so as we've been preparing for hybrid, we have job pools open, and I can tell you the greatest need for us to hire moving towards a hybrid model will be in the area of playground supervisors, actually gen ed para educators and special ed para educators, floater custodians, as you heard mentioned earlier, and then teacher substitutes as well. So if schools are going to go to hybrid model on November 9th, we would put as many new hires in place as we can by that date. Make no mistake, these are difficult positions to fill, but we're prepared also to look at certain secondary classified positions to use temporarily in the elementary while we continue to recruit and hire. So now that we've discussed a little bit about staffing, I'd like to turn it over to Maria Arias Horton to paint a picture of parent input that we received. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Becchio. The parent guardian poll, which was conducted between Wednesday, October 7th and Friday, October 9th, aimed to obtain a pulse on how our families were feeling at the time about in-person school. The results then would help inform the recommendation before you today. It is important to note that as messaged with the poll, we will be conducting a formal selection process once a decision is made about a return date. The response rate that you see here of 71% is a strong response, and it was obtained in part thanks to the partnership with our Promotoras Network, who provided additional outreach to our Spanish-speaking families, as well as the support of our educational technology services and family engagement teams. As you can see here in this chart, our families are split on their preference of whether to return to in-person learning in November or in January. Overall, 43% of our families would return November 9th, 38% would return on January 19th, and 15% would not return at all this school year, and 4% would choose a different date. These numbers are generally consistent at the different levels, except preschool, whose families show a stronger preference for returning on November 9th. After the poll was administered, we also accepted invitations by 2 local parent groups to have our superintendent participate in webinars. The Santa Barbara Parent Leadership Action Network conducted in English, and with Future Leaders of America conducted in Spanish, in order to expand on the information available related to health, safety, and instruction. In addition, parents were given an opportunity to send us questions about our plans for both health, safety, and instructional models. I will now turn it over to Ms. Sean Carey, who will share about our student poll.
Thank you, Maria. We had conversations about returning to in-person school with high school student representatives who serve on our superintendent's Student Advisory Council. And from there, we determined that we wanted to conduct a high-level temperature check of all secondary students' sense of overall readiness for returning to campus. So while there are stories and reasons behind these bar graphs here, out of the 43% of secondary students who responded to the poll, we see a similar split in terms of preference and readiness for returning to school in person currently. Overall, 54% of our students are ready to return to school in person and 46% are not, with junior high students more ready to return now than our senior high students. I'm going to now turn it over to Dr. Becchio, who can report on similar data for our staff.
Thank you, Ms. Carey. Here I wanted to point out that this poll represents a snapshot of our staff's preference between these 2 dates, November 9th and January 19th. This poll did go out to all staff members in the district, and we did receive a 75% response rate from staff. As you can see, our staff showed a strong preference for returning on January 19th over the November 9th return. Overall, 17% of our staff recommend that we return November 9th and 71% January 19th. 12% recommended that students return another date. And, as Superintendent Maldonado mentioned earlier in the presentation, there's a story behind each data point. And right now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Madrigal, who will talk a little bit about the reentry task force, where we got to hear some of those stories in person.
Thank you, Dr. Becchio. We also had the opportunity to further engage stakeholders representing staff, parents, community partners at the Reentry Advisory Task Force meeting, which was launched on October 7th with over 70 members in attendance. And the purpose of the Advisory Task Force is to provide guidance to our school district during the pandemic, as well as serve as advisors and ambassadors. At the October 7th meeting, stakeholders were asked to discuss how the results of the Return to Campus poll would impact student learning, as well as social emotional well-being. And what we learned was several things. Several themes emerged from our discussion, including the following. The health, safety, supporting students' social emotional well-being is a priority. And the question of how well we pair students and teachers who want to return to campus. We also learned that the hybrid learning model will be a challenging transition for students, and that navigating the flu season at potential rise in COVID cases continues to be a challenge for our community. During our meeting, we were also able to share resources provided to families during these very challenging times. And our colleague, Ms. Farnwell, will elaborate on these resources.
Thank you, Dr. Madrigal. Real briefly, I just wanted to remind our board members and people who are listening in today. I see we're up past almost 700 participants or more. I wanted to remind everyone to please continue to look to our website for information and resources. But right now I'm going to draw your attention in particular to resources that we want each family to be looking at and considering. After we get a decision tonight, which I expect we will, each family will need to make that decision for themselves, whether their child is ready to go back to school in person. And we have offered you some chapters and a couple of, there's a couple book chapters that we've referenced on our website that you can reference, and other resource to help you inform yourself on this important decision. And the three things that each parent would really need to know: the status of the virus in your community, in our community, which thank you to our partnership with Santa Barbara County Public Health, we're keeping track of and keeping our close eye on every week. You'll want to know whether your family has any health risk factors. And at this point, I'm imagining most families probably can answer that question. But lastly, you'll really want to understand and be able to feel comfortable that your school site has all the health and safety protocols in place. And so I'm hoping that when you watch that video tonight and we continue to share out more details about how our facilities are gearing up to bring back students in person, that you'll feel like you can answer these questions and make the best decision for your student. With that, I'm turning it back over to Maria Larios-Horton. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Cami. Indeed, Cami, our families will want to think through this decision as a family. And of course, the moment that we ask our families to make a selection, we encourage them to visit this website, which has so many helpful and relevant resources. What I also want our families to know is that we know our families are going to need additional information, and they're going to need us to implement multiple creative and more community responsive methods of communication. And that would include webinars. So we're looking into webinars, such as those that we have conducted in the past few days, working with our community partners mentioned previously, trusted radio stations, television, and social media to ensure that our families gain access to the information they need to make these important decisions. So just wanted to reiterate that we are aware that we need to look into alternative and sometimes unconventional ways of getting our families all the information they need, especially those whose first language is not English. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Cabinet. Board members, I stated in my opening comments that I wanted to bring some additional information. As you can see, that we have been doing a ton of outreach to our families. We learned from Susan Klein that our county rates are still in red. Given everything that I've been listening to in terms of our families, our teachers, our staff, I would like to amend my recommendation to include a second date for the board's consideration. So let's talk about elementary first. I have listened, I have learned, I see some of the concerns that many of our staff and some of our parents are bringing forward. And this is causing me to re-examine my recommendation. Number one, we need to do a better job of explaining our hybrid model. I want to thank Dr. Wagener to walking us through that math calculation that we need to do as we prepare to explain why it is that we need to do this hybrid model. But more than anything, this weekend I've been reading emails with concerns about, does 2 days in hybrid equal less instructional time with my children? So that is a recommendation, that is information that causes me to amend my recommendation. Number two is addressing the staffing needs at elementary with regards to playground supervisors and yard. Can we do this? Yes, we can. And we need to do a better job, and we promise to continue to do a better job of explaining all of this to our parents. I've been writing weekly to parents, as you know, where I've explained to parents that the week of October 19th, they would be asked to select their children's program. I will be, based on tonight's decision, amending all those recommendations and continuing to inform our parents on a weekly basis of our next steps and our timelines. Lastly, I have confidence that we can and are ready to implement either on November 9th or on January 19th. While it may seem to some that I am flipping my decision, I am doing this in light of new information provided to me in the last couple of days on staffing, and of course, hearing everyone loud and clear. Parents need more time. Teachers are asking for more time. I see you, teachers. I see you, and I'm listening to you, that you need more time and that you would like to come back united as one, as a K-12 system. So board members, with my amended recommendation, I'm asking that you consider both November 9th or January 19th for elementary. I like to keep my recommendation to open secondary January 19th and continue to authorize us to expand our in-person opportunities for learning and social and emotional support. All of these are on the condition that our county infection rates is moving to the orange level or to the moderate transmission rate. Thank you. I'd like to turn it back to President Boardcaps.
Thank you to the team and to Superintendent Maldonado. Before we dive in, and there's much to dive into, we definitely need to hear from our community members. And we do have 31 speakers. I would like to recommend to the board that we extend the time that we generally allow for public comment just a bit, so that everybody gets 90 seconds for those 31 speakers, which we are so grateful to have. Again, as has been mentioned, we have received, I don't even know, probably about 350 emails now, including today, probably about 500 emails. So thank you for everybody for weighing in. It's so incredibly important. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hio to manage so elegantly the public comment over Zoom.
Thank you, President Capps. Good evening, members of the board. We do have 21 speakers actually for this one item.
Great.
So I will name the first 5 speakers. And so I'll start with Sanita Beal, Roseanne Crawford, Karen McBride, Carolyn Hara, and Barbara Barr. So I'll go ahead and start with Sanita Beal. Sanita, can you hear us? I'm not able to see her. give her access to speak. One moment. I will loop back around. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Ms. Roseanne Crawford. I believe we have some technical difficulties. I'm not able to give him access to speak. If Sunita, if you can raise your hand. Okay, Sunita, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You're here. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, board members. My name is Sunita Beal, and I'm a parent of 2 high school students in the Santa Barbara School District. I would like to make a point about going forward in our local conditions. Currently, we are in the red tier. I'm going to read some numbers out loud. 4, 9, 2, 6, 6, 8, 12. Those are the number of new cases in the South County this past week. These are our local conditions, and the numbers are low. With the numbers in Santa Maria fluctuating, we are not likely to achieve a sustained orange tier numbers this fall, and probably not until this spring. So I'm asking that the district consider local conditions, not county conditions, for any plans they make moving forward. I'm strongly advocating for moving forward in the red tier in November for an additional set of cohorts, including science labs, arts, special education, approved school clubs, and leadership activities. Adding these cohorts now will allow us to feel confident about a hybrid plan in January. And this plan will not fundamentally disrupt the teaching plan that is in place right now. We need to realize that our students are not college students. Our students have developing brains. Every school talks about reducing screen time. 100% Zoom learning was a stopgap measure. 8 months later, we need less screen time and more in-person engagement. It is time to move forward. 8 months into a pandemic with protocols to prevent COVID infection, it is time to move to in-person instruction, not just to educate our students, but to keep them healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we go with Roseanne Crawford. Roseanne, can you hear us? Roseanne, can you please unmute yourself? I will loop back around to her. So I'm going to move forward with Miss Karen McBride. Miss McBride, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. How are you?
Good, go ahead.
Thank you. Members of the board, I just want to thank you for your service. And I recognize that this is a really difficult time in education. And so I want to appreciate you. I can't imagine a more difficult decision, but I know you've heard from so many people in recent days, and there are so many perspectives to keep in mind. And I want to be very clear, as I've said all along, that educators want to deliver the best programs they can in our schools in the safest manner. But as you know, there are still big concerns about everyone's safety when staff and students will be in contact with each other again with the reopening. So I think we need to be really open about the fact that cohorts with approximately 14 or 15 students can be misunderstood, because children and educators could be exposed to far more than that on a daily or weekly basis. For example, maybe people don't know this, but junior high teachers can have as many as 160 students on their rosters that would be seen. They would see them in the course of 2 days or maybe a week. And these students will be mixing with far more than a cohort of 14 or 15 over the course of their on-site attendance days. And we know that some families have children in both elementary and secondary schools. So how will that play out with elementary students returning in early November? The upcoming holidays are also a big concern, and there are a lot of unanswered questions. What's going to happen when families are getting together? While district leaders have been working hard to discuss what comes next, educators haven't all been actively informed, and they haven't. And was that, did you say that was times?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next we have Roseanne Crawford.
There you go. I think I found what happened. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Lovely. I can appreciate the efforts of all of you. I hear the sincerity in all of your voices. You're really, really pulling to make this come through for the kids. But the bottom line is you really have failed in the job of getting children back to school. What disappoints me, I think, is the lack of direction and leadership. And I'll explain why. All the private schools and several districts have been back for a month. I know you're a larger district, but you can scale it up. Hybrid only 2 days a week is not acceptable. It's not enough time. The kids are still getting damaged. Yet the district is playing with surveys to teachers who are essential workers to go back. I don't understand this. To me, that's where the weak leadership shows from the top to down. And, you know, kids have to be back in school. This board acknowledged awnings and tents had come in a month ago. So why are they still not in school? You had all these guidelines from the health department and you were going to be nimble and so on and so forth. I haven't seen it, nor have the kids. They've been badly, badly hurt in every way. The public health department has given the green light, and you had all that stuff months ago. Your data points and all your surveys don't show the whole picture. They don't show working parents that are so stressed out, the depression in children being documented at alarming rates. There's a way to do this. You don't need all the teachers. Get the teachers' aides back on, the volunteers. Keep the teacher in virtual, and then make your pods around that and let them facilitate. It's not that difficult.
Now we have Carolyn Hara. Ms. Hara, can you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me? Yep, can you hear me?
Yes, you may begin.
Okay, perfect, sorry. Good evening, Caroline Hara, Santa Barbara Parent Leadership Action Network. Thank you all for your service. Thank you also for taking the time to update our parents this week. I'm speaking today to express my support for a near-term, achievable solution that is sustainable long-term. That is the return of cohorts for all students across all grades and campuses, ideally by November, with a variation of the hybrid model proposed. Based on my conversations with parents, teachers, and administrators, the health stats, and the survey data, it is very feasible to have students return to campus in November and for all families to have equitable access to the best possible experience in education given their preferences. The way to do this is through simultaneous remote and in-person instruction that can be implemented now and that can continue in the months to come and as we weather the unknown. Under this scenario, 3 cohorts would receive instruction every day of the week. 2 cohorts would alternate time on campus, and a remote option would also be available, allowing students to Zoom into classes live and all students to remain with the teachers they love. This is doable, preferred, and achieves all of the district's objectives while addressing the very real risks we face as a community due to the social emotional impact of continuing 100% remote instruction through the fall. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next is Barbara Barr. Barbara, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Go
Hi,
ahead.
I'm Barbara Barr. I teach 6th grade at Roosevelt Elementary School, and anyone who knows me knows that I've willingly given a lot to teaching and to the students for 32 years. I wanted to communicate some of my concerns about the elementary returning to hybrid in November. I have concerns about safety. I have concerns that are unanswered questions. But my main concern is extremely personal. At the last board meeting, somebody basically said that because I don't know anyone who's died from COVID, we should return to in-person learning. Well, I know someone. My father died from COVID in July. I became afraid for his life in April when he told me that my stepbrother went out and did not follow safety precautions. Fearing the worst, I took the time to tell my dad how much I appreciated him and that he had made my life amazing. In July, my stepbrother ended up bringing COVID into the house. My dad died from a heart attack before they could get him to the hospital. We had a memorial service for him on Facebook. And if you watch it, you can see my stepbrother sobbing and begging my father for forgiveness. Papa Bear, please forgive us. Please forgive us. How can this be an okay position to put our students or staff in? No one should be put at risk to get COVID from school, and school has not been made safe enough yet to keep that from happening. And I say yet. None of us could bear to see one of our students crying and begging for forgiveness because they brought COVID into the school and their teacher died or the classmate died or into their home. And somebody they loved dies. Please put a pause on bringing the elementary back. Thank you.
Thank you. I will name our next 5 speakers: Melissa Garcia, Jessica Flores, Michael Petch, Jennifer Miller, and Sarah Allers. Melissa Garcia.
I want to start by appreciating the district leaders and board members that have ensured families are fed, have access to remote learning, and are giving staff the tools and support they need to work well. The following public comment is not directed at you. It is, however, directed at the 1 or 2 district leaders and board members that currently lack the conviction to maintain a solid position that prioritizes the collective health and learning environment consistency. While this is a time that calls for flexibility, there's a difference between chaos and flexibility. Currently, the ongoing flippant position of a few key leaders has brought us to the moment where teachers have to indignantly make the case for the value of their health and lives. This chaos is adding stress to the majority of staff. This chaos is the result of a divided leadership. It is the result of a rushed effort to please some very vocal parents. It is the result of being politically or professionally motivated to preserve or advance your current position. After all, this is an election year, and some of you are new to the district. If you vote for a large-scale reopening of schools and continue to contribute to this felt chaos, you'll be following in the footsteps of ill-informed and selfish leaders that were ill-prepared to meet this moment. The decision made by these leaders are directly responsible for the 7.8 million COVID infections and 214,000 deaths in the US. You will be among these leaders at the local level. To those of you that argue you are coming from a position of equity, I would ask you to expand on your specific contributions to ensuring that those disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 will be safe in a well-planned, real, not performative way. You will find some of these equity concerns in the letter I've emailed all the board members tonight. You have my permission to share it with the district leadership. The science is clear, the crisis is clear, the consequences are clear. Don't tell us that you care, show us that you care.
Thank you. Next is Jessica Flores.
Good evening, board members. I just want you to know you're very much appreciated, and I can't imagine being in that position and having to make this decision, but I'm gonna speak personally. For me, I have a 6-year-old in elementary, and I cannot think of a worse time to bring first graders back since they are so touchy and need physical contact. What if there's a child in the class that tests positive? Do we have to quarantine the entire class? Do we quarantine the teacher? What happens then when somebody tests positive in that classroom? I haven't had any answers from anybody, so I'm just wondering what happens then. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Michael Peck.
Hi, my name is Michael Peck. I'm a teacher at Roosevelt School. I am in opposition for opening November 9th. You can social distance, you can give me all the masks and hand washing stations in the world, plexiglass and a 10-gallon jug of hand sanitizer. But at the end of the day, what matters for safely opening our schools is our community positivity and infection rates. And Santa Barbara right now is a borderline case. Additionally, underlying the drive to reopen is that remote instruction is somehow inadequate. And I will tell you this, effective teachers are teaching effectively online. Remote learning has its challenges. It places a burden on parents for sure, but our priority should be keeping children and everyone in the community safe. History with COVID has told us that being cautious is warranted. And as Ms. Ford said in the beginning, timing is everything. And I would suggest that the board choose to play it safe, wait, see how cold flu season progresses, see if our rates have gone to low levels and are maintained at a low level, and evaluate from there. So that once we go back, we can stay in, because it's hard to close Pandora's box once it's been opened. Thank you, and I trust you'll make the right decision.
Thank you. Next is Jennifer Miller.
Hello, board members. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Jenny Miller. I have a 5th grader at Washington School. My 4th grader has moderate to severe special needs. My 5th grader is in the GATE program at Washington. Their educational needs are polar opposite, but what they do have in common is this hybrid model will not work for either of them. It will not work for most of our kids. The hybrid model will take the 5 days of interaction with their teacher and classmates they have currently to just 2 short days. It will force them to work without any interaction with their teacher or classmates for 3 days. The kicker is my son is in the medically fragile category. That means If he gets COVID, he could become very ill, and it could be fatal for him. That may force us to have to choose fully remote, which under this model will take away my 5th grader's teacher entirely. In other words, she will go from 5 days of interaction with her teacher and classmates to 0 interaction because she has a brother who could die from COVID. Finally, and very importantly, our teachers have made it clear this is not the right option. 85% of them have said we should not be doing this right now. Teachers are the lifeblood of our schools. They are working tirelessly. They are working harder than any of us. Why will we not listen to what they are telling us, which is this hybrid approach at this time is not the right decision?
Thank you. Next, Sarah Ellers.
Hi, thank you so much, board, for your time and all that you are doing. I am a San Marcos High School teacher, as well as a member of the Santa Barbara Teachers Association's Equity Committee. I speak tonight on behalf of my students. Class after class has expressed the need for clear and consistent student-centered compliance guidelines in questions like, how strict will school be? What do we do if we see someone breaking the rules? What if that someone is another student or a staff member or a teacher? What will you do, Mrs. Allers, to keep us safe while we're in your class? Now into my 8th year of teaching, my philosophy is keep as many students engaged with content and in the room as possible. I use restorative approaches like proactive connection circles, reactive connection circles, informal teacher-student dialogues, multiple verbal warnings, all as methods to keep kids in class. How does this change under pandemic conditions? How do we both humanely engage with students and keep class a safe space for all? How do I protect students from individuals and families who flout CDC guidelines as an overreaction as unnecessary? How do we keep the experience consistent for each student from class to class, from campus to campus in the face of such polarized responses to our current circumstances? My students are asking for clear, concise guidelines, not to find out what they can get away with, but in order to feel protected and safe in their learning environments. The current consequences listed in the mask protocol worksheet are based on the needs of each student. But how will we know which students are in need of accommodations, especially those who are not in our rooms, but who we interact with in the halls and elsewhere on campus?
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Name our next 5 speakers. Monty Hudson, Marge Perko, David Hahn, Kim Barron, Charles Claw. Monty Hudson.
Hi, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm a parent of a junior high student. Multiple immunocompromised persons are in our family. We are very careful about COVID, and we follow the science in decision making. Tonight, district leaders have talked a lot about family choice, but without open schools, there is no choice. In July, district leaders assured this board, and I quote, "We are ready to keep our students and staff extremely safe. When California gives us clearance to reopen schools, we will be ready." Since then, including tonight, nothing but mixed messages have been heard. That's why responses are so emotional. On September 29th, the state cleared the district to reopen schools safely. Case rates are 679% lower than July and trending downward. South County, where 100% of students and 87% of staff live, has been in the moderate orange level for 18 days now. Close to 15,000 students are not in school because in all of Santa Barbara and Goleta, 13 people, 13 are actively infectious. By waiting until January to begin integration back into secondary classrooms, students lose 34 additional instructional days to remote. That's almost 20% of the school year, on top of what they've already lost. The risk of children being left behind academically, mentally, and potentially permanently is 100% certain. I urge the board to only approve a reopening plan that has all students back in some form of hybrid in-person learning, ideally by November 9th.
Fine. Thank you. Next, Marge Perko.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm in opposition to the opening of elementary schools on November 9th. I have a son attending 6th grade at Adams Elementary. Like many families, this opposition comes from a personal, visceral situation. My husband has had a heart transplant, and I have an autoimmune disease. We are among those classified as medically vulnerable to the worst effects of this virus. We also have lost 3 family members. As you consider returning elementary students to campuses on November 9th, we only see choosing the at-home learning option as the only safe option for our family and our teachers. But has more information been shared? So little information for such a big decision. We hear details about hybrid learning, independent study with no teacher or no peers, and mention of distance learning with a lot of staffing concerns. The isolation of the current details of distance learning would probably break my son's heart and spirit. So how do we choose? Do we stand by our choice and accept a potentially worse situation? Or do we send our son to campus despite our health concerns? You are asking us at this point in time for a November 9th reopening up for vote. You are asking us to make a vital decision based on faith. But I'm sorry, lives are at stake. You can't promise that on November 9th, the hybrid solution will be 100% safe for our teachers, students, and their families. But you do have a promise all over your district identity. Every child, every chance, every day. I don't think a November 9th reopening fulfills this promise for all families. Thank you.
Thank you. We have David Hahn.
Hello.
Yes, you may begin.
Hi. So my name is. First of all, I want to thank you guys for just taking the time to listen. My name is David Hahn, and I'm a teacher at La Cumbre Junior High School. I'm excited for the opportunity to go back to school to teach in person when the time is right. That's because I love the relational aspect of teaching, and honestly, I'm tired of seeing a wall of student names without knowing my students. I can guarantee that almost every teacher that's in this board meeting can relate with that. However, given the pandemic, I want to make sure that everyone is protected. Karen McBride mentioned that junior high teachers will see a lot of students. Personally, I will see 150 different students in 1 week. Students will mingle with one another, and I'm not sure how we're going to be able to manage their interactions with one another. I also live with a family, one of whom is a teacher who is pregnant, which puts her in an at-risk category. That puts 2 teachers with 100 students each, contact each. If we go back to school, I just want to know that we have a plan, a written plan, that tells us what will happen if someone is sick, what will happen if someone breaks the rules, who's sanitizing between periods. There's just so many questions unanswered. So until we have a plan, I don't think it's appropriate for us to open our schools. I want to encourage the board not to rush to a decision until we have a legit plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kim Barron. Ms. Barron, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, good evening. I sincerely hope that you listen to the majority of staff, families, and the current recommendation of our superintendent. I know some parents won't understand Superintendent Maldonado's current recommendation for a January opening, but I hope the board does. Hybrid means students will be with their teachers significantly less time than they are now. Children will be in class 2 days a week. As we heard, a lot of time will be spent washing hands and making sure kids stay in their designated spots. There will be no group work as there is now in Zoom breakout rooms. Students will be home on their own for 3 days without a teacher to help them. They won't have interaction with other students like they do now because we'll be teaching the rest of our students in person. Students will be doing apps or packets. Simultaneous instruction for elementary students to Zoom into their class live is not feasible in elementary. We as teachers are not producers, directors, or tech experts. We want to give quality instruction, not try to teach 10 children in person, hear kids calling for help over Zoom. That's completely untenable and unrealistic. It's not time to reopen now. It's not safe. Please wait until after the holidays to reconsider and trust us teachers to deliver quality instruction 5 days a week as we are now, albeit virtually. We do have relationships with our students that I actually think will suffer if we go back to the hybrid model and we have to be like, get away from me. You have to stay in your 6-foot distance from me. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Next is Charles Claw.
Good evening. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks, board members and cabinet. I'd like to start by commending the cabinet for taking a cautious approach toward reopening secondary schools. Attempting to acclimate students to hybrid learning after just one term spent in a fully remote model would be suboptimal under any circumstance. This close to the holidays, with infection rates likely to rise as folks move indoors and travel more, opening schools could lead to disaster if we rush back, even in a hybrid model. In addition, I've spoken with my students, I'm a teacher by the way, and some of their families about returning to school. And while some are in favor of it, I haven't heard from a single student who wants to return to campus only to be yanked back into fully remote learning once some students exhibit symptoms or test positive. The whiplash effect that would be created in this case would certainly not serve students. In this spirit, I think it's prudent that we continue to monitor local conditions and adjust our plans accordingly. Returning to a hybrid model on January 19th sounds manageable as long as we maintain our current trajectory. However, if we backslide into the red or purple tier in the coming months, doing so could be even more unsafe than returning tomorrow. Following through on a plan for the sake of following through or for appeasing some of the louder voices in our community could endanger our staff, students, and families. In short, January isn't automatically safer. I'd like to close by saying that I have focused on the reopening plan for secondary schools because I teach in a secondary school. On this question, my opinion matters because my health matters, my life matters. By the same token, I urge you to listen to the voices of elementary school teachers regarding their reopening plan. This is a challenging time that will be made less so if we stick together and support one another. COVID-19 transmission is called community spread for a reason. If some in our community have their health compromised, that affects all of us. Please remember this as you make your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next 6 speakers are Alexa Levesque, Nicole Lau, Virginia Alvarez, Brian Campbell, Natalie Grubb, and Jasmine Seja. Alexa Levesque, can you hear us?
Yes. Good
Go ahead.
evening. So I was saying I'm here to voice my support until at least January 19th at the earliest. I support this for many reasons. Most pressing, we're entering flu season and we're entering the holiday travel season. All these amount and many other reasons to serve to all of these serve to make reopening schools now not only short-sighted but also dangerous, especially now as the CDC has acknowledged that COVID can be spread through aerosols by small particles that can linger in the air for minutes or even hours, even among people who are more than 6 feet apart. Hand washing doesn't do much to prevent the spread of aerosols. Cohorts are rendered useless if the air is contaminated for hours afterwards. I'm hearing that parents will have a choice to return, but will teachers be given a choice too? Aren't we partners as well? I also want to address concerns I've heard about our students' education. I think there is a false assumption that a return to physical school, and I do say physical school because school is still happening, learning is still happening, that a return to physical school means a return to business as usual. This is not the case. Teaching under the hybrid model will be pretty much the same as teaching over Zoom. As you've heard, without being able to get within 6 feet of a student or have students sit within 6 feet of each other, I fear that instruction may be even worse for students than currently on Zoom. Students will be unable to collaborate and teachers will be unable to work with students one-on-one. At least over Zoom, breakout rooms can be used for both of these tasks. Finally, I wish to remind everyone listening that teachers are teachers because we care about our community. We're not asking to delay a return to physical school for our own safety, but for that of our entire community. The fact that as of now, no teacher has tested positive shows that social distancing works. It will stop working when we are no longer socially distant. It only takes one super spreader event, like reopening schools, to decimate an entire community. We are all safer if we do not rush to return, especially when there's so little educational value to be gained. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Nicole Lau.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, you may begin.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm the parent of an elementary student. I urge you not to reopen in November, and I urge you to be more transparent about reopening details. 56% of parents and over 80% of teachers do not want to return in November. Please also explain what the plan is for students who will remain at home. Parents have been given no information about this before today. Please ensure that students at home will receive daily instruction from teachers. Independent study is just unacceptable. Please match teachers remaining home with students remaining at home. Please also establish outdoor classrooms and hire additional support staff for cleaning and cohort management, and please prepare an equitable schedule for equal use of floating custodians. Finally, I want to acknowledge that district staff and teachers have been doing a very good job. The teachers have been doing an excellent job. My son is thriving with his teacher, that you do show strong leadership, and that I'm confident that together we have the ability to resolve these concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Virginia Alvarez. Ms. Alvarez, can you hear us?
Okay,
Yes, go ahead.
perfect. Good evening, Superintendent Maldonado, members of the board, members of the public, and staff. A big thank you to all the teachers, administrators, and support staff for their hard work. I truly appreciate it. My name is Virginia Alvarez, and I'm a school board candidate. My question is in regards to contact tracing. What is the student and staff ratio to a registered nurse? What is the contact tracing plan when the nurse is out sick or goes on leave? I have been contacted by parents who are concerned because they have heard that some nurses have gone on leave due to the added stress of contact tracing. What is the plan if and when this occurs?
Thank you. Next is Brian Campbell. Brian,
Oh, good evening. Hi. Yes, you got me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. Thank you, guys. Well, I want to start out by saying we all appreciate these tough waters that you're navigating here. It's uncharted territories. And I agree with not going back to school until January. And in January, it should be full-time, no hybrid models. You have time to prepare for this. Please start doing so. I understand that some people have personal preferences, but those personal preferences shouldn't influence the masses, especially when it contradicts science and data for our area. A month ago, science and data stated schools can open case by case with a waiver, no action from the board. Science and data says that we can open schools today, actually, without a waiver, now that we're in the red tier. Still, no action from our board. Instead, we've let the fear dictate school policy, not science and data. We've let kids who want to goof off dictate what decisions the adults make. So we're still Zoom schooling. While hundreds of people mingle in Costco every day, our children are still home. While kids hang out in large groups socializing, not in school, we're still Zoom schooling. My issue that I want to take up with you is the carrot that the district is now hanging in front of the families now, stating a big if we downgrade to orange, that the school will reopen in hybrid after the election. This is yet another carrot, especially since per a Newshawk article, there's a high unlikelihood, given Newsom's new metrics and the uptick in cases in Santa Maria, that we will be downgraded to an orange tier until after the first of the year. So why are you dangling yet another carrot? We went through this all summer with the opening of schools. So please stop using our children as political pawns, take the action and open our schools full-time in January. Thank you, everybody.
Next is Natalie Grubb.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Can you turn this down? Hi, I'm a mom of 2 kids in the district, and I feel very strongly that all our kids need to go back to school 5 days a week. So I'm urging the board to come up with a concrete plan and transparency to all of us parents, because you keep saying that you're listening to us, but I'm not seeing that with the actions from the board. And at no time did the district, when we could file for a waiver, did you do that? And now we have other districts close by open, operating, schools close by open and operating, and all their kids are back in school while ours are suffering on Zoom. I've heard from teachers personally, and of course a few tonight, that a small percentage really don't ever want to go back to school if COVID still exists. How do you, the board, balance that with our children's needs to be in the classroom for their well-being, their mental health, and a proper education? Because we can all agree this Zoom education is not working. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker is Jasmine Ceja. Jasmine, can you hear us? Jasmine, if you can unmute yourself, you can speak. I believe we've lost Jasmine. Unfortunately, we've lost Jasmine Ceja. And that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Hio, and thank you to all of our speakers. I just want to give a chance before we dive in for Superintendent Maldonado, I just called you Super Maldonado, to respond to anything or sort of set the stage for our discussion if you care to.
So again, thank you to everyone who's engaged with us in this very difficult decision, and it is going to take our whole community together. And I understand, I apologize to those of you who've lost family members to COVID-19. It is a very difficult time. And so with that, Susan Klein and I did have a couple of clarifications based on some of the comments we heard tonight. Susan, would you like to start with those?
Sure. One of the things that's important to remember is when students come back to in-person learning and at school, there will need to be the distance, the physical distance to maintain safety. And when there's physical distance, that means you cannot have that many children and adults in a classroom as you do normally. So our classrooms and our facilities and our eating facilities will not be able to accommodate the same number of children and adults as it had in the past. So I just want to keep that in mind. It's not as simple as bringing children together. We really have to do this safely, and I know everyone wants to be safe and healthy. The other thing I wanted to respond to just was about the contact tracing. We have set up a system at the Public Health Department, and we've given letters to all schools, including Santa Barbara Unified. When there is a positive case, they will give the letter to every member of that class or cohort. So everyone will be in quarantine for 14 days. One positive case, whether it's an adult or a child in the class, everyone goes home for 14 days. That's how we keep it safe and we don't spread the disease. And public health will do all the contact tracing for all the positive cases outside of school. So all the contacts a family has in the community, that's our job at public health. We're just asking that the schools notify of families of children and adults in the classroom because you know that group best and you will get that information timely. So we will have a partnership and we'll work together on that. Just wanted to clarify.
Susan, and just to clarify, even if we reach the minimal rate of transmission, what we call the GOLD, even if we get there, are schools required to continue to maintain social distancing requirements?
I would suggest that face coverings, physical distance, cleaning, disinfecting, that is not going away. We have seen places across the world and in Europe where it went way down and then it came back up again. Until we have a vaccination, until we have an effective vaccine and we have other ways of making sure this virus will not transmit, I see those things in place long-term, honestly.
The other thing that I'd like to address, board members, is the hybrid model of instruction. I like to acknowledge and recognize that we have some work to do and we commit to doing that in the coming days and weeks in explaining what is instruction going to look like in a hybrid model. We know that with the traditional sense of teaching and learning that we have all experienced growing up is no longer true. We do not have the same conditions and we are all going to learn differently. I recall the summertime when we all talked about distance learning. What we did in spring was made better once we opened up in August. And we have been delivering a rigorous distance learning, and I hear everyone's concerns around hybrid, and we will get through that as well together. Parents need to understand that in elementary, for example, our hybrid learning model, the 2 days that they're not going to be with their classroom teacher, there will be other staff and our art, PE, music, specials teachers available to still have contact with those students. They will not be left alone for 3 days and forgotten. So we want to make sure that we do a better job. We're not going to be able to do it tonight in this meeting, but we continue to inform our parents on the value of hybrid learning, because we're going to be in hybrid learning for a long time. And that's what I'm hearing from public health. And I need to bring those two thoughts together and ensure that we do a better job of explaining it to our teachers, to our principals, and to our parents. But some of this work will also be done together. We'll continue with our reentry task force, bringing in others who want to help us with this planning and making it clear so that everyone can continue to have confidence in the distance learning model that we're delivering now in the new model that we will deliver in hybrid. And I think those are pretty much the comments I'd like to make as you go ahead and take up your discussion, board members.
Thank you. And I just wanted to thank the teacher who spoke about her father who passed, Ms. Barbara Barr. I know that was not easy. I spoke with her last night, and I just, makes it so real for us all here, and I just appreciate that. so much. And teachers, we hear you, we see you, we see everyone here. We have so many, we still have 746. A question has come up about why we're meeting in Zoom when we're talking about returning. And of course, we need to work out the protocols, but of course, and it's my opinion that we would resume to in-person as a board, of course, when we move to in-person as schools. So I just want to clarify that and move into a very heavy and important discussion here. I see Ms. Ford has her hand up, so I will turn it over to Ms. Ford, both for questions, for deliberation, but to again reiterate that we do have an option here for recommendation as it regards to, in regards to elementary, which is either November 9th or January 19th, hybrid, and then the recommendation still stands for secondary, starting hybrid January 19th. And then the third part, which is important, we haven't spent as much time on it, but also action to allow the expansion for cohorts in all areas. And I just don't want to overlook that because, again, of the success and the traction that's already been made there. And we need to move forward on that, in my opinion. So I will turn it over to Ms. Ford to kick off this conversation. And thanks everyone.
Thank you so much. Wow, I don't have many questions, but I do have some thoughts and I want to share them. First of all, the responsiveness and the thoughtfulness of Superintendent Maldonado and her cabinet are really impressive and very important tonight to me. The willingness to be flexible and to reflect on the ways to better communicate and explain what we're doing are admirable. And the number of community members, parents, teachers, students who reached out to us with outstanding letters and great public comments about the pros and cons of the original recommendation. While I admit they were a little overwhelming since we received many hundred, have ultimately been very gratifying. I support the change of recommendation and the return to school in hybrid for all on January 19th. Wholeheartedly, because first and foremost, we just must be more mindful of the comprehensive education and information that parents and teachers deserve in order to be excited and optimistic about this change. We do hear you, we do see you, and we will go to hybrid, but we have more work to do, in my opinion. It's true that we've spent months and months being so careful about the pandemic, and we should continue that. That's how we got to the red tier, and it's why we're on our way to orange. But we can't turn on a dime and even in a few weeks' time say, now everything is perfectly clean, everything is safe, and instruction is amazing. I think we need more time for that. And I'm really hopeful that between now and January 19th, we do a few of these things. One, we've got to really carefully evaluate student learning so far this year. We also need to create a succinct but detailed description of what hybrid will really look like at all three levels. It's very different. Three, we heard about the concerns around staff. We've got to hire the additional staff, whether it's certificated or classified, that is necessary. We also, as Ms. Kapp said, we've got to strengthen and expand the cohorts now attending school in person. Those are the students with the most acute needs, and please, please increase the activities that we offer at the secondary level for music, drama, art, science labs, and sports. With a vote tonight for January 19th for all, tomorrow the teachers can go back to remote learning. And honestly, we have heard so much about successes, and then we can begin to carefully and creatively plan for hybrid with fingers crossed that we'll have the go-ahead from public health. And I know we can do this in January, and I am sure we will. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Any other board members wish to ask questions? It's kind of a rhetorical question myself, or provide a statement. Anyone? Yeah, Dr. Reed.
Yeah, first of all, it is a very challenging conversation, and I appreciate hearing from all of the students, parents, teachers, the district staff, the classified staff, and I also want to acknowledge Barbara Barr and your loss. I'm so sorry, and many people who have also lost family and friends due to COVID. I also want to acknowledge the district staff and their board report, and also the willingness of Superintendent Maldonado to take in new information over the weekend, that in this, what we need to be understanding is this fluid world that we are in, this challenging situation. It's not remaining static, it's constantly changing. So we have to be able to step back and look at it from a different lens and perspective. And we need to really be cognizant of all aspects and analyzing it. So what comes to mind for me are actually many questions, but I appreciated hearing that from Ms. Clyman Rothschild and also from Superintendent Maldonado, that based on the fact that we have to wear face coverings and be in physical distance and continue the sanitation procedures, that we will most likely be in a hybrid model throughout the school year. So knowing that as what I'm hearing currently as an assumption, then there really needs to be backward mapping as to what does a hybrid model look like, and what is an effective hybrid model for elementary, junior high, and high school. That has been a key question that has been emailed throughout these past week or longer, that there has been no transparency as to what that looks like. And I think this is an opportunity for really looking at each school site, what each principal and teachers define as what that looks like, and working in teams in their PLCs and designing a hybrid model that is going to be successful for their students and those particular students in each classroom and in each school. So I think it's really looking at the culture of the school and what the needs are. And I personally think it's really important that parents have an opportunity, as I would like as a board member as well, to observe and have a conversation with principals at each school site to see what is the plan, how transparent is that plan, and what does it look like. So some questions that I have with regards to the hybrid plan is actually, does the time, the difference between remote learning and hybrid equates to a loss of learning hours, it sounds like what I'm hearing. So I wanted to know, there has been other models wherein the hybrid model is a collaboration with the actual remote model. So a teacher simultaneously is teaching the students who are in their class remotely and in a hybrid status with students in the classroom. And I know there was a question raised today from an elementary teacher saying that's not going to be possible. But this simultaneous model, is that something that's being considered for secondary? And are there options like that for elementary? Do we have anything? So how do we make sure that we don't have the loss of actual time and hours with the students? I'm not sure who can answer that question for me.
I'm going to ask Ms. Sean Carey and Ms. Ana Escobedo to address those questions, as they've been working with our principals on the hybrid models and the minutes and hours. And Dr. Becky, I don't know if you want to jump in as well.
Thank you for the question and for the opportunity to respond to it. The short answer is yes, those are under consideration, Dr. Reed and others. I think that preliminarily, even in the summer when we first started designing in conjunction with our bargaining unit and teacher representatives and principals, what a possible hybrid model would look like. There were many notions then of what the program components would be and what the elements of design would be. And then of course our governor made the decision for us that we would open in distance learning. So we are resurfacing many of those conversations. There have been some early statements about sort of what will or what will not happen with certainty within a hybrid model. But I would say at this point, we are considering all program components within hybrid that would help to optimize the the time that teachers and students have together in real time. So, you know, people have heard terms like synchronous and asynchronous. People have heard terms like at school or independently, but also we can think about blending models. And so there can be combinations that are either agreed upon norms for instructional design or are options for instructional design, but all with the goal of trying to maximize the learning continuity for students, whether they are receiving instruction on campus or away from campus. I hope that helps a little bit for secondary, and I will let Ms. Escobedo respond at least initially for elementary, but I'm here with follow-up for any follow-up questions there may be.
Good evening, board members. It's my pleasure to speak to all of you again and to all of the community. I'm so humbled to hear your stories. But yes, the answer is just like my colleague Sean just shared with you. We have revisited all of the plans that were agreed upon and worked through in the summer. The timing is different, so we are working through those challenges. We're not starting school in hybrid in August. We're talking about a hybrid model possibly starting in November, which for elementary schools, we are not in semester, we are in trimesters, which is the end of our first trimester. So there are so many factors to consider, but to answer your question, Dr. Reed, yes, that is a consideration. It is a model that we have seen other districts use. And so that is part of what we are considering to come to an agreement to which will be the best model for Santa Barbara Unified at this time.
Thank you. How could we possibly move if we don't have an actual plan currently? We're sort of right now, it sounds like we're reframing, we're rethinking, but how is there ever a plan to actually get us launched in November 9th at this point, which is 3 weeks away, when we don't have a transparent plan in place?
So the plan relies largely on parents making a choice. And again, I've acknowledged that we will need to do a better job of explaining to the parent these choices, Dr. Reed. We believe we can accomplish that in the next couple of weeks so that they can make an informed choice. Once parents make a choice, then we will be able to configure how classrooms, how many children select each model so that we can then configure the classrooms based on the parent's choice. So it is a collective effort, and that's what we would take on next.
So just to be transparent about what that means for everybody listening, what's the process? How would that take place? Would there be a survey? So can you give me an?
Yeah, in the next couple of days and weeks, we expect our principals to explain the hybrid model, because I'm very cognizant that it still doesn't seem to jive with most people. And so the principals would be able to explain those to depending on their numbers of students, their configuration at each school site, along with their safety plans. Those are the two things they need to accomplish. Parents will then be asked to officially select a program of choice. So it's almost like when we register kids for the beginning of the school year, we always take into account a projected number of children per class. So we are reorganizing in the same manner. Once parents make that official choice, principals with their staff will then need to design the classrooms and divide the children into the appropriate classrooms. We are in a different setting now because we heard from our families tonight the heart-wrenching decisions that many have to make depending on their health factors.
So based on those decisions, currently, if we were to move to a hybrid model in November, or even if we move to a hybrid model in January, students would need to most likely or could be displaced from their original teacher that they're with currently and be put into multiple age group cohorts as opposed to single cohorts. Is that a possibility? Is that what could be happening?
There are so many variations that can happen, and that is the design challenge that we face.
So those transparencies of how it is uncovered will be dependent on each school site and what the principals design for that site in collaboration with the teachers?
And their parents' selection and the facilities capacity. They have to see how many classrooms do we have, how many children are enrolled, how many classrooms are available for outdoor learning. Do we put a teacher inside and a teacher outside, or is it a fluid classroom? So all those design challenges have to be worked out. And it's not as easy as doing it for one school. We have to do it for 17 schools at a time. Yes.
So I guess how is it even possible to do something like that by November 9th?
We believe we can do it by November 9th if that is the wish that we move towards. And we also believe we can push it off until January 19th. Those factors do not change very much based on what tasks need to be accomplished. Of course, having the luxury of getting through it through January 19th would give us more time to figure all that out. But at the end of the day, our parents will have to make these decisions in the coming days and weeks.
Right, and I think that's an important point. So I also think it's important to note that we want to do everything in a safe and healthy way that's best for our students and staff and teachers. And so to rush into something that we really could be really starting day one, you know, tomorrow, something we can do a deeper dive within each school site would be more of a comprehensive approach and not be rushed, but really start something with fidelity, really looking at it from all angles, because truly the parents have to understand these are going to be changes. The students have to understand that I may not be with my teacher. You know, teachers are going to understand, what does that hybrid model look like for my classroom? And I think what was brought up at last school board meetings around, there's a district sort of, you know, description of what needs to be done, how many hours need to be, you know, in the classroom, what, you know, what needs teachable moments those are. I think every situation is going to be different, right? So that flexibility has to be there as well, but that the principals are really needing to really connect. From what I'm hearing you say, it's really going to be a site-specific principal, teacher, parent collaboration.
Correct.
And so we're, as a district, as a cabinet, you're framing it, but it's really a deeper dive is going to be within each site.
Correct.
And that also is going to be around outdoor learning, right? So options for outdoor campus learning is based on each particular site and space that's available.
Correct.
Okay. So, and also in terms of ELD students and emergent learners, so I think that goes back to what Ms. Ford said, and I think what Ms. Cap said, is the idea of bringing back or bringing in additional cohorts, not as classrooms, but for the populations that we're seeing need more support and different types of instruction time. So what are the ideas around that, a rollout of other cohorts during this time as we're planning, if indeed we all agree, on a January 19th for elementary and secondary? It's a long-winded question, but.
That's okay. We plan to continue to implement the small cohorts as was expressed in my original superintendent's report by Dr. Wagenek, where we are bringing in those children that are highest at risk. I know that we have special ed students, we have our emergent multilingual learners. I know that in the secondary, we've brought in kids who are getting the Ds and Fs. We know they're at higher risk. So we will still continue to do that work in parallel to the planning for the hybrid and the opening, depending on our date decision tonight.
And then also just to add to what Ms. Ford said about music, art, and PE, are those considerations in terms of cohort models bringing, what would that look like?
So we have to work with our teachers on bringing back some of those classes. If it is a credit-bearing class, we'll have to look at that. much different than if it's in an after-school setting, because we know that credit-bearing classes, we want to be mindful of how that will roll out. Sean, could you, I think you and I talked about this a little more. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so it is a little bit dependent on matching up where we have demand from the community and where we have staff willingness to come back if it is prior to a full rollout of hybrid instruction for any credit-bearing class. We have also talked, there are some courses that we've talked about being in maybe a tier 2 rollout of cohorting, classes like career technical education in the secondary space, where we've got students who depend on machines in order to complete the learning tasks associated with the courses. And courses in the visual and performing arts particularly can be both a credit-bearing course and an after-school experience. Think of theater production, for example, being both things. And so thinking through how programs like that could exist and with what parameters, and ideally even things that have to do with ASB, the ASB space in secondary and activities, particularly thinking about folks like our seniors, our freshmen, 7th graders who have never even stepped foot on a campus that they're due to spend just 2 years at. So those are some of the thoughts we've had about the prioritization of other kinds of in-person opportunities that we may be able to pursue upon taking care of the needs of our most acute learners, as we are already underway with doing.
So that would, go ahead.
Let me just expand that. I want to be clear that I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver in this area, because we want to be sure. We keep hearing this concern about safety, this concern about everyone being ready. So we will have to look at those long and hard as we make the decisions of who gets to come back on campus and at what time and how.
Great. So that will be more to be revealed once that is situated. Okay, and then I just have one final question, and that is, this might be for Dr. Becchio and maybe for you, Superintendent Maldonado. It sounds to me like we don't have enough staff to move into a hybrid model. How many staff would we need, and what is the possibility of being able to hire that staff in the time frame? Certainly in 3 weeks if it was November 9th. But within the time that we would need it if we were to roll this out January 19th.
Thank you. I'll take that question. So we have current pool openings. We've had them open for some time now. And, you know, right now the major position that we need filled is playground supervision for elementary, were we to start in November. So we figured we need around 11 FTEs in that space. That would give the sites the bodies they need really to just start a hybrid model. Realistically, I believe we would come up short of that number by November 9th. Again, why the contingency plan would be to look at secondary classified positions that possibly could fill that void until we can get those positions hired. We have several other, just to kind of close the loop on positions though, it's important to keep in mind that we're actually looking to hire floater custodians. We have job openings for para-educators, general ed and special ed para-educators, playground supervisors, as I had already mentioned, and substitutes. So we have a lot of work to do to fill some of those positions as well, because those are going to be key also to bringing students back to campus. And so if there's anyone in the community you know that might be interested in serving for a few hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, have them look at our website and apply.
So essentially, we really have a lot to do to really be prepared to move into a hybrid situation that's with fidelity and healthy, safe return for students. And in addition, substitute teachers. Are the substitute teachers that are on your list, are they substitute teachers that are capable of coming into the classroom if it were a hybrid model based on the fact of their age? And are they more retired substitutes?
Some are able to, and some are not. I do have to tell you, our substitute pool consists of some older teachers that had already put in a career and retired, and have come back to substitute, and we are hearing from them, back from them, that some will return and some will not. Right now I'm looking to increase by about 10 the long-term sub model that we put in place for distance learning, and keep that in place so we have secured people every day to fill in. And then also we have our sub calling list where we would just be able to call people each day, but that pool will be diminished somewhat by the fact that there's some that aren't willing to come to campus.
So thank you everyone for the transparency. I think key to all of this is really trying to understand all of the ramifications of going into a hybrid model. And in doing so, what we need to understand in terms of teacher hires, in terms of substitutes, in terms of hybrid models for elementary, junior high, and high school, in terms of, you know, relationships between principals and teachers and parents, and what that's going to turn out to be, is a process. And based on everything that I've heard, it seems to me the best decision would be to wait until January 19th, when we could do this with fidelity and really focus on ensuring that we can do it at the most optimum, safe way for everyone. And based on what you're sharing with me, I can understand why you would move your recommendation from November 9th to January 19th, because this fluid decisions and this information that came through, along with everything I think that I've hopefully asked, and more will be asked, is that we realize that we really aren't quite ready to move forward on November 9th. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Reed. Any other board members? Ms. Sims-Moten, I see you first.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, everyone, as we continue to work our way through this very difficult and challenging time. But let me just first say that I want to extend my condolences to those who have lost, those who shared their loss here, and those who didn't, or, you know, chose not to share their losses. So I want to express my condolences to the families. And then secondly, I want to thank everyone who is making their way through this every day, things that are changing, and we're being adaptable to whatever, you know, we need to do, and taking into consideration all that we've heard through comments tonight, as well as the many emails that came through and probably are still coming through. I think it's important for us to know that it's going to take every last one of us coming to center, taking into consideration all the things that we have to do and adapt, and how we are going to have to make, you know, our own individual adaptations. And I have seen through the presentation that the administration, I appreciate the responsiveness to the concerns, as opposed to being reactive to the concerns. So I want to appreciate that, and I want to appreciate the letters that are responsive to be able to express their concerns, and so that we're all able to hear what each other is saying, and then making sure we're at the center, that we're hearing both sides, because it is going to be a balance of time. There's going to be a balance of your own personal values, your own personal safety, and how you feel. So there's going to be a huge balance with regards to that, and how we do that is going to take the effort of everyone realizing that there's going to be a balance, and that there's going to have to be some give and take. Certainly, you know, we're not choosing death over life with regards to that ever. I know I heard a lot of that coming through on the emails, as if we were choosing life and death, and we're certainly going to choose to live every time. We need to also, how we look at this and how we work through this whole process. And so not minimizing or mitigating anybody's concerns at all. And, you know, what's the primary safety for our students, and that they feel safe and our families feel safe sending their kids to school, and that our teachers feel safe teaching, doing what they love them to do, and the administration, and as well as the board, how we are just trying to make our way through this. And then I would also add that just given, again, to be responsive and not be reactive. I can appreciate Superintendent Maldonado, your rethinking and maybe reevaluating, you know, your ask in terms of whether it be November 9th or January 19th. So I appreciate that. And so that says, again, everybody's thinking and taking into consideration what everybody's thinking and trying to have it balanced in some way. I also think that a January 19th, and I can appreciate the questions that have come and comments from both Ms. Ford and Dr. Reed, and I'm sure to come with Ms. Cass and Ms. Munoz, is how do we, I think January will give us time to take, again, to be responsive and not reactive to what's going on, to be very responsive to, some of the concerns that were raised in a common thread that I was seeing through some of the emails was that the communication isn't clear in terms of perhaps some you may have a conversation over here, but it's not really clearly communicated down the line. It feels like telephone, we're talking over here, but by the time it gets to the post, folks that's mostly closely impacted, the story is different. So I think that's really important to make sure that we're communicating and people are understanding what we're saying in this board meeting. I know we've been doing presentations for quite some time now, and some of the information that people feel they haven't gotten, I'm wondering why, what that is, and how do we communicate that after that clearly, asking a conversation, what did you get out of that? Is this what you, and asking what did you understand in that presentation? What's missing for you to get there, right? Because we've all said safety and health is the absolute paramount for us to get to school, and because we ultimately want our kids back in-person learning, and we want them there in a safe way. Again, I also think, and I don't fully understand the hybrid model, but not in the sense that I don't agree with it, but I guess my question would be, the hybrid model is we're going to have the hybrid, meaning that students coming in and out in small amounts, small numbers, not amounts, in terms of numbers. And does the hybrid mean also that teachers who do not want to come back, they're able to teach for, continued distance learning, or those who want to come back are going to be teaching in the classroom? So just fully understanding what hybrid means. And I know we're continuing to work through that so that we're understanding that. And I keep saying January 19th because there's some things I think that we will be better prepared to do if we have that more time to be able to do that, certainly with the staffing that needs to happen to ensure that we're able to meet the demands of our students, and to make sure that we're able to make sure they're there in that hybrid design, if you will. And one of the questions that I had was, so while we're waiting if we approve through the board to January 19th, will you continue, and if you said that, I apologize, will we continue adding cohorts throughout up until that time? Or will we just stay with what we have right now?
We've said that we will continue to add some cohorts as needed. We'll be continuing to monitoring students. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I thought I heard that, and I appreciate that in the fact that the more that we're adding up until there, then that gives us a better idea as we bring on more students, what we need to do in all the questions that are being asked. We're bringing on more students. What about transmission? What about all those things that Susan Klein at Rodhull had talked about today? As we're bringing on more students, that's another opportunity for us to be responsive in case something happens as we're ramping up to that. With regards to that piece. So I appreciate that we're going to continue to do that, in a safe manner. And I just, again, I want to just appreciate all the efforts that are going here, and that we're going to get there. Every fiber in my being said that we're going to get there. We're going to have to be patient, and we're going to have to be, just understanding of each other and making sure that we're hearing, and most importantly, make sure we're communicating and asking, is that what you got from that? Because often we may assume that we've said something and someone has it, but not clearly, right? So to just be respectful of all the questions that are asked. And I want to appreciate the comments from all the students and parents and teachers as well that have brought up, and even through the presentation that the administrators have talked about. And then lastly, I would say that to some of the questions, and I think Ms. Capps talked about it earlier, but I am certainly in support for this board coming back and being there in person. But we certainly know that has to be done in a safe and healthy manner. It may not mean that we may be able there to distance because there's a small number, but to be able to have people come back in, that will have to be a smaller number, how that happens. But very much in support of that, and however we need to do to make that safely and get there. I know our board of supervisors kind of do that, but very limited in terms of actual in-person, public comment. But how we need to get there, certainly important in support of getting the board back in person, so that we're representing what we're saying, in terms of that we're asking you. So we're going to, we're supporting doing the same. So I would appreciate all that I've heard tonight. And I know we'll continue to to work toward the center and what's the best for our students and everyone involved in that, because ultimately our goal is to get them back, you know, in person, and the teachers getting back in classes and doing what they love, you know, in a way that's going to be different. The world is going to be different, but how do we do that and still maintain making sure our students are having the best learning education, environment that they can. So I'm in support of moving us to January 19th, but we're going to have to get back in person. We just want to make sure we're responsive to all the things that are going on and we get there back to safety and healthy. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sims-Moten. Ms. Munoz.
Okay, first of all, also to give the condolences to Ms. Barr and others that may have lost family members and loved ones to COVID. And also, COVID-19 itself, folks that have had it, that have tested positive, and it's something that obviously, we're still learning about, and the long-lasting effects of that, which we, as a board appreciate. And I think that, one of the concerns I have, in terms of the returning to hybrid sooner than later is, as we know, the holidays are coming, family gatherings, travel and so forth, increasing the risk during flu season. So I know many of the teachers have spoken about, how they also have students in our schools, families that have multi-generational homes and such. My mom's 83, so I certainly, can relate to that in terms of the risk. And I appreciate, our superintendent and our cabinet working hard to be responsive and come up with the best plan possible, in terms of the staffing, with Dr. Becchio, Mr. Vizzolini, in terms of the, sanitizing of classrooms and so forth. And all that to say, is I think that additional time would be helpful just because of the months that we're speaking of, and also hiring of staff, the substitutes, hiring of them, and adequate playground, FTEs to be hired. Because of social distancing, it is going to be more of a challenge than we had, previously. Life has changed. And I want to, first of all, also assure the teachers that we're listening to all of their concerns. I know they've talked about like their individual classrooms and the ventilation and such, while at the same time, they're also teaching our students, with distance learning. So just to have time to communicate more in terms of knowing that our cabinet is responsive to them, and also their principal, to communicate that at this time is a good thing, in the next months before, between now and December, so that we're prepared for January. I think that just in terms of families themselves also being assured that they're not, the elementary school children will go at the same time as the high school and junior high, and that we're prepared for that, just emotionally, mentally, and physically. So without, going into more detail, I certainly agree with, with Dr. Reed, with Kate, Ms. Ford and Ms. Sims-Moten. And I know that as a board, we want the best for our community.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz, and I'll round us out here. I just want to point out that we've been in distance learning for 9 weeks. And if we were all sitting here on a Zoom 9 weeks ago, I don't know if we would have, I can just say, we would be so pleased to know that we would be flooded with people defending distance learning. And that's what's happened for the last 4 or 5 days. I mean, flooded, hundreds of emails with very specific stories about special ed teachers and how they're connecting with their students, special ed parents, parents who have been pushing forcefully to open as soon as possible, now realizing that there's a lot of challenges with every single option, and the distance learning, thanks to our teachers. And I just want to give a big bravo to our teachers for the fact that we have this evidence now. I mean, again, I've read every single email. I haven't responded to all, but I will try to. But I mean, 95% of since Friday night when this agenda came out have been in support of keeping things as they are for just a little bit longer. And we're talking about a difference of 6 weeks in elementary. And I was prepared to support the recommendation of our superintendent previously, but now that she's amended it and given this option, I'm with my fellow sister board members to give this more time to get more ready. But we're going to push. This is concerning on hiring. I want us to be as bullish as possible when it comes to hiring. I don't like the fact that we're not ready, in part because we don't have staffing. I get that there isn't the workforce, and I've heard that from other districts neighboring who are also having those challenges. So it's not for lack of trying, but we have to figure this out. And it's going to take money, and it's going to take being bullish, and it's going to take partnerships, and just even the fact that now 700 people know that we need help. We need help in yard duty, and our schools need help, and that's one way in which potentially parents or others can help us. I also, again, in applauding teachers, I just want to thank the teachers at Dos Pueblos for putting together a really great, in my view, hybrid plan. I think we should explore that more. And I want us to be as bullish as possible, like I mentioned, on the cohorts. From what I saw yesterday, even in a short period of time at the Santa Barbara Community Academy, and to hear that those 50 students who are now part of cohorts, those were the 50 students of a school of about 250 who were really disconnected in the spring when things were really rough. And now, those were the first ones who were offered back in, and 60 were offered and 50 came in. So we need to be doing as much as we can to make those cohorts work. And I love the idea of expanding tiers to technical training, or to wood shop, to things that actually students can really benefit from being in the classroom more than they can on Zoom. But again, I just want to thank our teachers, our staff, our parents. You can tell by those polls that we have very different perspectives right now. It's too bad. I mean, I wish, when these surveys go out, and I know they're not perfect and we hear a lot of complaints about them, but it's hard to make this work. It's just like fingers crossed that they came back with some strong consensus. But they didn't, except for the fact that teachers did not feel ready and did not feel safe overwhelmingly. And we have to honor that. I honor that. I hear that. I hear the real concern. It's easy to maybe blow it off as political pressure or this or that, but it's a real fear that we are hearing, and we need to do what we can as a staff, as a district leaders, as a board to create that sense of safety on behalf of our teachers. So I'll just end by saying, what we're hearing tonight and what we've heard for the last several weeks, months, is a lot of different perspectives. But I really I hope that we're not divided, as we move forward. And again, it's just a matter of weeks till we figure this out even further, and we have made progress. The fact that our cohorts are working so well. And again, I'm just going to emphasize, it's not perfect. It's definitely not working for everybody, but I really heard loud and clear how hard our families are working to make distance learning work, and how hard our teachers and our staff and our principals are working to make it work. And so now, I'm prepared to move forward with the consensus of this board and with the consensus of the staff and our superintendent's recommendation. She's giving us the option, but I can hear that we're leaning towards a January hybrid for both secondary and elementary, as well as really, again, expanding those cohorts. So I think I summed it up, but if Superintendent Maldonado, if you'd like to, before we move, or if someone would like to make a motion, I'll open it up. Dr. Reed.
Well, I'm happy to make the motion unless Superintendent Maldonado would like to.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I'm happy to make the motion to move to move our movement back to hybrid model to take place in January 19th for both elementary and secondary, and with fidelity.
Second. Board, second. Great. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have a tough vote, but we have a unanimous vote, and I want to thank everybody for that. And now, Superintendent Maldonado, would you like to
Thank you, board
final words here?
I do. I want to make sure we are really clear on what this board expects out of our cabinet and our principals. I just want to summarize. Thank you all for this vote of confidence that we are now going to announce our opening of January 19th for elementary and secondary children to be back in school in a hybrid model. I've heard you loud and clear that you want to make sure that we have a clear plan, clearly communicated at all levels, not just told to people, but that people understand what we're saying and they can say it back to us. I'm going to ask all our teachers who we have listened and seen tonight to be sure that we are hearing clearly from them what it is that they need to understand better in terms of the way that they're going to implement. I have a lot of faith in our teachers. In August, we talked about a rigorous distance learning plan and they implemented it, and they've been implementing, and they are assuring me that they're continuing to do great work with that. I trust them, and I know that they're gonna engage with us, and that when we come back in hybrid model, they're gonna all be ready to implement a hybrid model. I also heard that we have clear marching orders on being really strong about our hiring practices. Big announcement, everyone who's listening, please get us some employees, some people that wanna work a couple of hours in our playgrounds and other jobs that we will be advertising, and that we continue to evaluate our student learning. I heard that from our board member Ford, so that we can have an opportunity to make sure that children are thriving. I believe that is what I heard from all of you tonight. Thank you for giving us this clear direction. We are ready to move forward.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We are going to take a quick break, but we will be coming right back to public comment on non-agenda items. We have a handful of speakers. So let's see, it's by my clock, it's 9:19. Let's come back at 9:25. We got about 6 minutes, so we can keep things moving. Thanks, everybody. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are going to move to public comment on non-agenda items. Thanks again to those who are participating with us for hanging in there. We'll move this along quickly. But Mr. Hio, if you could please introduce our public comment speakers on non-agenda items.
Yes, we have 6 speakers on this item. So I'll name off 6. Roseanne Crawford, John Morse, Kim Pascase, Jennifer Hale, Sheridan Rosenberg, and Moni DeWitt. And we'll start with Roseanne Crawford.
Hi, this is Roseanne. The same day you held the Zoom presentation supporting and promoting the ethnic studies class, Governor Newsom vetoed the requirement at this time. Ironically, for the same reasons, numerous parents' voices have echoed concerns to this board for months. The Zoom presentation further exposed it as a divisive model. You are clearly out of touch with community. We need to hold off on this and get it right. The Department of Education will adopt, modify, or reverse the curriculum by March 31st, 21. Newsom said he supports ethnic studies, but vetoed the measure out of concerns that its current version was biased in its exclusion of other ethnic groups. He also stated there is much uncertainty about what content should be included in the K-12 ethnic studies course. It's a good concept, but needs work. As is, it's biased and creating problems. With the upcoming election, we can vote for new board members. Vote for change. McLaren, Campbell, and DeWitt will put students above politics and represent parents and teachers' voices. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kim Pascase.
Hello, board members. Public comment at these board meetings has changed. I've been to lots of board meetings over the years, but since the segregationist group, Fair Education,
and the mysterious group Impact Education started attending these meetings, the tone and rhetoric has changed. Many of us are tired of hearing fair education speakers weaponize literacy and test scores against communities of color in our district. Many parents of color I know feel attacked in these meetings and do not feel safe enough to make a public comment to voice their concerns, their hopes, and their needs. These test scores are meant to be stepping stones to change. They are not meant to be tools of shame, reducing children to numbers and case studies. Fair education is a very small segment of our community, and they have flooded these board meetings, LCAP meetings, and advisory councils and done harm. I know other white community members do not agree with this weaponizing of literacy and test scores. Here is what I know for sure. We have to name what is happening to be able to see it in order to change it. I ask the board to continue to name it as well, to push back on false statements, to reach out to underrepresented groups and open all channels of communication, to look at advisory councils and take stock of who is at the table and who is not, and make adjustments so one group doesn't overtake the decision-making process. I ask you to take back these spaces and bring every demographic in our district back to the table with equal voice and access to district leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jennifer Hale.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, hi. Thank you, board, for the opportunity to speak. I'm a parent with 2 kids in the district, and I appreciate all you're doing during these challenging times. I'd like to shift gears for a minute and share an observation. I've noticed that the tone and the rhetoric that's flooding public comments has become extremely negative, particularly around the topic of literacy. Of course, we all want our high reading and math scores, but I fear that these literacy statistics are being weaponized against the families who are most impacted. And I'm wondering if anyone is considering the harm that this is doing to the families with children who are struggling, and are their voices being heard? As a white parent, I'm compelled to express my concern that their voices are being drowned out by the members of Fair Education and their political shapeshifter Impact Education. Meeting after meeting, they are pounding this space with their segregationist rhetoric, harping on poor literacy scores and a call to end anti-racism training and ethnic studies. Reading and math scores are important tools. They are the catalyst for change, but they should not be used to shame and alienate the very families who are being impacted. I see parents of color with children struggling with literacy. They do not feel that they have a voice or that these meetings are a space for them. I urge the board to push back on this extreme language. We teach our kids that words matter because they do. Please make sure you counter these harmful narratives and set the tone for this forum. All families should feel that they have access to our district's elected officials and feel comfortable sharing their.
Thank you. Next is Sheridan Rosenberg.
Thank you. Good evening. I've been listening all evening about the need to hire more custodians, the floater custodians. And there was an issue that happened September 12th last month where a Santa Barbara custodial supervisor, Joe Arroyo, was arrested and for 12 felony charges of continuous sexual violence and abuse against a child for 7 years, from the time she was 7 years old. He was also charged with possession of child pornography with peepholes. And none of this came out to the public until September 22nd, when an Ed Hot article came out. And then Justin Tuttle sent a scathing email to everyone asking why we weren't notified, why the community wasn't notified that this employee of the district was arrested, and that there was a 10-day gap before the district came out with a statement, a public announcement. Now that was a decision made on your part to sit on this. And what I want to know is, after the Mad Academy, and after certainly that was one of the reasons we wanted Carrie Matsuoka gone, it was such a violation of our trust. These are situations where you have a duty, as soon as something like this happens, to do a public announcement, to make sure that all potential victims can come forward and give information to law enforcement.
Time.
Duty to protect everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to note that Mr. John Morse is not online. So our last speaker is Moni DeWitt.
Thank you, Sandra. You are amazingly patient and kind. So yeah, I want to speak to the fact that I wish our whole community was just more comfortable expressing differences of opinion. I have come forward with my experience because I'm dyslexic and so is my son, and the district didn't offer him what he needed, and it became very stressful for a variety of reasons. And there are federal laws in place that demand that, you know, you get a free and appropriate education. Now, I am not part of any group. I am giving this because the scores, in fact, are low. And I used to speak to Matsuoko. All he had was a pilot program for 3 years. It took care of about 100 people. I've personally met people who had to wait 2 years for their IEP when they asked for it in the 3rd grade. Now, I just illustrate these because I want you to know it's out there. I'm solution focused though, and I want you to follow AB 1369. So we automatic testing in the K through 3 space, give intensive interventions, and let's invest in teacher training. And to all those people out there who are sensitive about me speaking my truth, I have to say that I believe in human rights and I believe in my right to free speech. And I actually think me bringing this up has brought it in focus and has kind of, you know, made you guys have to think about it. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And to people who just want to hear everything like everybody else, that's kind of like the Stepford community. And I find that really abhorrent. And our kids are getting a mediocre education at -113 for special needs, and the Latinx 89. So I hate to burst your bubble, but it's not pretty. Somebody's got to be accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. And President Capps, that concludes public comment.
Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to Mr. Hio. Okay, we are moving we just did item C7, and now we are moved to item D, which is a happy thing, acceptance of donations. I need a motion. I can do it. Okay, Ms. Sims-Moden, I saw ya.
I accept with gratitude the donations and move for approval.
Second. That was a tie.
It was a tie, but okay, Ms. Ford, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, we move now to the consent agenda. Would any board member like to pull for either a question or comment on any consent agenda items?
Hey, the Stepford board, wasn't that rich?
Oh, okay. Got an open mic. Okay, Ms. Sims-Moten, please proceed with the items you'd like to pull.
Yeah, it's just item, are we on F10, I believe? F10, 11, and 12. And I don't disagree with it, and I move for approval with it, but can we just talk a little bit what the rehabilitation window, that project is about? Because we've heard a lot of comments that windows don't open, and you know, particularly now when we're going in classrooms, the classrooms don't open. So will this rehabilitation project fix some of that or address some of that? If Mr. Disalini? Okay.
He left.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but yes, we did it. It will help the windows. We won't be able to fix all of them, but we will be able to fix quite a few. We did a prototype on the back of Santa Barbara High School about a year ago, and we had some things to work out. But yeah, now we're ready to move on this for Santa Barbara High, Santa Barbara Junior High, and I believe La Cumbra. Yeah.
Okay. So recognizing that you can't fix them all, are they in a queue to be fixed, or what does that mean exactly?
There's not enough funds to fix the amount of windows we have on these old buildings. That was a big conversation when this bond was just passed about how much money we could actually spend on the windows. Because it's quite expensive to replace some of them. So we're doing the worst ones first, obviously.
So will we still be at least looking for funding as it come along? Maybe that's something that we can still keep in the hopper, that we essentially want to get them all done, but understanding the limitations, but what we can do now and fixing the most severe of them, but still keeping in mind, can we still look at it in terms of that, particularly now we're in COVID and we're putting people back into, classrooms that maybe they don't have the ventilation where that makes sense to do that. So if we can still keep it active as we're continue to work on it, as a whole.
If the board chooses to, if we have money left over, that could be a project that we could knock down a few more windows.
I'd like to say something, Ms. Simpson. What I hear you asking for is that we provide you with some additional information, and I'll ask Mr. Vizzolini to go ahead and answer that question in writing to you to gather that information.
Yeah, just recognizing the limitations, but are there other things we're doing to try to get them all? So exactly, if he could do
Yes,
that would be great.
we'll do that.
Yeah. So I make a motion to approve this consent agenda if there's no other questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sims-Moten. Dr. Reed, I see a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Okay, Superintendent Maldonado, did you want to clarify something from?
I would like to take a moment to clarify a comment made, and we know that it is not our habit to respond to public comments, but in the interest of the organization, I'd like to say that in the case of the employee that was arrested, when we initially learned of the arrest, police investigators made us aware that it involved a domestic incident and posed no threat to the general public. In an effort to shelter the identity of the alleged victim, we did not make a district-wide announcement about this case. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And just to clarify, you actually are quite entitled, as well as your staff, to make clarifications on public comment. What we just can't do as a board is engage in a conversation that's non-agendized. And so board members could as well. So just want to clarify that is in terms of the Brown Act. And so I think it's helpful to the public when things are stated and aren't necessarily accurate that you have the chance to address them. Thank you so much. Okay, so moving on to item, we just did.
President.
Yeah, thank you. I know what you're guiding me towards.
No, I actually have a comment. Mr. John Morris says he's online, but so I'm trying to connect with him. He was wanted to speak.
Yes, he was in the queue for public comment for non-agendized items, and we welcome him now.
Yes. And Mr. Morris, can you raise your hand? I am still not able to see you online. So if you can hear me, if you can raise your hand so I can grant you access.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, there. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm John Morse, and I'm a member of Fair Education Santa Barbara. I'm a practicing attorney with more than 40 years of litigation experience, and I'm responding to the report that the district spent more than $300,000 in defending the litigation commenced by Fair Education. In my opinion, the amount charged by the district's law firm is outrageous and should have been challenged by the district. The firm's published billing rates are reasonable. The total amount charged is not. If we assume an average attorney billing rate of $300 per hour, then $300,000 in legal fees equates to 1,000 hours of attorney time. That is equivalent to one attorney working full-time on this case for 6 months. Based on my experience, this is totally out of line for a case where the district did not propound or respond to any discovery requests. No depositions, no interrogatories, no document requests, and no document production. Discovery is generally the main cost of any ongoing lawsuit prior to final trial preparation, which never occurred here. In short, I believe this district has been derelict in allowing this law firm to use the district as a cash cow while defending its practice of bucketing money to its friends in the nonprofits with no competitive bidding. With this performance, it is no wonder this district has a multi-million-dollar deficit and cannot live within its means. One wonders how many other incidents of mismanagement and non-management remain to be uncovered.
Fine, thank you. And that concludes public comment.
Okay, we are zooming all around here on Zoom. So now we need to turn to the hearing that we have. I tried to print out my agenda today, so I'm less shifting around on screens. So that means we need to now move to our action agenda, which is item G. We already did item G1, and so now we move to item G2. Which is board action on petition for readmission of an expelled student. I'm going to look towards you, Dr. Reed.
I am here. Yes. In the case of 2019-20-30, I move to make the motion of student reentry from full expulsion for 2 semesters ending on June 2020.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Swinton with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, item 3, adoption of resolution.
Ms. Camp?
Yes, we do need to. I'm sorry?
I thought we, I could be zoning out, believe me, it's been a long day, but don't we have public hearings?
We do have public hearings. I'll, because we started the action agenda, I'm going to move back to that, but thank you for the reminder. And Ms. Carey also gave me the reminder. So we'll just, let's take care of this action items. There's 2, and then we'll move to that. But thank you. Okay, so Ms. Carey and Ms. Escobedo for item 3, adoption of resolutions regarding sufficiency of instructional materials for elementary and secondary schools.
So respectfully, does it make sense to go ahead with the resolution prior to the public hearing?
Thank you for, okay, thank you for doing that. Okay, I apologize. We'll move to item F, which is notice of public hearing regarding the sufficiency of instructional materials for elementary and secondary schools. So technically I need to stop this meeting and open this new public hearing and turn it over to you both for this as well.
Thank you, Board President Capps. And I don't know of public comment that is in the queue. Ms. Trujillo is confirming that. So this is just very briefly to be clear that this is then the public hearing. This is the public's opportunity annually to comment on the sufficiency of instructional materials. Momentarily, we will be bringing to the board our request for action on the resolution pertaining to the sufficiency of instructional materials. And if there are no follow-up questions from the board that Ms. Escobedo or I can address, and there is no public comment.
Thank you. Okay, and just for the public, we have to have public hearings on certain things of this nature from the Department of Education statewide. So that's what we're doing here. And now we'll move to the actual approval of this. And so back to the action agenda item that I just previously introduced. I'll turn it back to the both of you.
Okay, so as Ms. Capps just mentioned, we are required by statute to annually attest to the sufficiency of instructional materials in elementary and secondary grades in core subjects and in alignment with all frameworks and standards. So the board can see here our attached files, which detail our instructional material provisions and adoptions, as well as the language of the resolution itself. And again, Ms. Escobedo and I are here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you to you both. Any questions or comments from the board? I think we're good. Okay, and we need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Dr. Reed, thank you. I will second. All in favor, keep your hands up.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, item 4, approval of memorandum of understanding between Santa Barbara Unified School District and California Association for Bilingual Education for Professional Development. Ms. Larios Horton.
Hello again, board members. Before you today is a proposal for professional development services in consultation for our dual language immersion programs for this current school year 2021. The proposal would support our current implementation of dual language immersion at Santa Barbara Junior High School and the upcoming implementation of an elementary dual language immersion program at McKinley Elementary School. These customized consulting and coaching services will support 3 layers of capacity building including for DLI teachers and staff, campus leadership teams, and district leadership. While we hope to someday not need this additional support, at this time, as we build our own knowledge base in this area, we will continue to need additional technical assistance. I'm open to any questions or the board may have about our proposal.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just have a quick question for Ms. Orchard. Thank you for this. So I noticed it's just 1 year. You'll be reviewing it annually to see if there's the need for the professional, and then as we build more internal capacity, we'll have less of that need.
That is the hope, Ms. Sims-Moten, that we build internal capacity. As you know, this is brand new for our district, so we want to make sure we do it right.
Okay.
Thanks for that question. Any other comments or questions? Okay, excellent. We can move forward with a motion. Thank you to Ms. Larios Horton and Ms. Ochoa. Thanks for being available.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Dr. Reed, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion carries. Okay, great. That concludes the action agenda. And now we move to our report discussion agenda, which is item H1, report on secondary newcomer emergent multilingual expository reading and writing.
Board President Capps, oh, go ahead, Ms. Blunt.
Did we do F2?
Well, we spoke to them, yeah, the public hearing.
Yeah, but there were
for
two
both items.
It's a separate item.
They're separate, right?
Yeah, F2, Ms. Ochoa has a short hearing.
Oh, I apologize. I combined them. I apologize. We can go back to F2. Ochoa, I apologize for that. And please, we'd love to hear from you about item F2.
All right, good evening, board members and superintendent and cabinet. Like you mentioned, a public hearing is really more of a compliance issue for our state department. And so here tonight we are speaking about our amazing early childhood programs in our district. And mainly we are just going to speak to the closure that happened back, of course, in the spring and our reopening plans. And it's really fitting with tonight's presentation. So it's going to be just a very brief presentation. If you go to the next slide, Brian, please. So like I just mentioned, our early care programs, like the state calls it under Title V, we were not able to open due to the public health orders. And so we are required to discuss in a public hearing how we are preparing to safely reopen our programs. That's a picture of one of our little guys in one of our pre-K classes over at our Franklin Children's Center in his distance learning corner there. Next slide, Brian, please. So our reopening plans, it's kind of a little interesting because we actually are somewhat open. We have our infant and toddler center programs over at Santa Barbara High School. They have been open since their first day of school and will continue to serve those families and mainly our staff that are working within our school district and also our teen parents. So we will continue to provide those services for our families. Our preschool programs will remain in distant learning and will follow, Santa Barbara Unified's pathway to in-person instruction as we you saw tonight. That will then happen in January along with the rest of the school district. But we do want to say that this week we welcome 15 of our moderate to severe special education preschool students into small cohorts over at our Franklin Children's Center. So we are been part of the district reopening plan since the beginning of the school year. We'll continue to bring in small cohorts as needed. Next slide and last slide, Brian. Please, thank you. So just like everyone else, we'll continue to communicate with families about all of our health and safety protocols that we're taking at all of our sites, reaching out to our families and request their decision also for the preference for their students, whether to come back in person or to maintain in their distance learning plan that they continue that they have now. And we also have to have all of our licensed facilities approved for reopening by our local community care licensing. This is Miss Kelly over at Adams, just in one of her Zoom sessions that I caught her in singing one of her opening songs to her students before her math lesson. So one of our parents described our preschool distance learning as the Cadillac of distance learning. And I'm just really proud of our staff who have just really, back in March, were really nervous about how they were going to support their students in remotely, but they've really have just gone above and beyond. Parent engagement has just been amazing as well. So it's obviously for 3- and 4-year-olds is not ideal, but we are making the best of it, and we are just seeing a lot of success. So I'm just really proud and of the work that we've done so far. So that is it for this public hearing, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thanks, Ms. Ochoa. Any questions? Yeah, Mrs. Moten.
Yeah, I have a comment and a question. So thank you. It's always so good to hear how our little ones are doing and how they're thriving, and that we're giving them some focus and attention that's needed. So so thank you for all the staff that are working that, and certainly for the parents who are supporting that as well. So my question would be, as you come online with the January 19th in-person learning, are you going to be experiencing any staffing issues that we were hearing about earlier in the presentation?
So so far, we have surveyed our staff of who's going to come back and who's not, and we've only had one staff that says that they cannot come back, and that's is not because she doesn't want to. She certainly wants to, but it's mainly due to a medical issue. So, but it actually ends up working well with our plan, because she's willing and excited to stay as the distance learning teacher. So when, we do know that some parents are not comfortable sending their students back at all this year, and that's totally okay. So we will be, reassigning our students to her. And so that is part of the plan as we come back to in-person. So
Okay.
we won't have any staffing issues.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Helpful question, thank you. Questions or comments? Okay, great. Again, apologize for going out of order there, but we all got it covered. Thank you, Ms. Ochoa, and for all the work you do, and everybody who you work with, because I know it's a team effort. Thank you. Okay, now back to H1, which is our report and discussion agenda. Report on secondary newcomer, and I will turn that over back to Ms. Larios Horton.
Thank you, board. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you our latest update related to curriculum and the courses supporting our newcomer emergent multilingual students in grades 7 through 12. This curriculum supports a little over 100 newcomer students in U.S. schools less than 3 years across 9 sections or blocks in our secondary schools, with 9 very committed teachers. For those who do the math, you will find out that our classes have a very small teacher to student ratio, since instruction of students new to English requires quite a bit of individualized student support. The reason that I bring you this report today is because we plan to bring this to you for action at our next board meeting. So why this curriculum? Let me share that districts across the state have had to pivot with regard to curriculum for emergent multilingual students. And for our district in particular, at the secondary level, the main takeaway about this new legislation is that we can no longer wait for students to acquire English before we give them access to high quality, engaging, rigorous, grade level appropriate curriculum. Unfortunately, our former curriculum did not meet this requirement per a recent federal audit. So let me share a little bit more about this curriculum with you. Next slide, Brian, please. So the ERWC/ELD instructional materials were developed and piloted and studied through a competitive U.S. Department of Ed, Office of Ed, and the English Language Acquisition Unit at the Federal Department of Education, National Professional Development through a grant. In addition, this curriculum is backed and supported by important organizations that you see noted here on this slide. A curriculum overview and course sequence were provided in this board report. Next slide, Brian. So ERWC is a standards-based grade level English language arts, English language development curriculum designed specifically for emergent multilingual learners that's satisfying both of the basic requirements set forth by the federal program monitoring. The foundational documents used in the development of this curriculum include the California English Language Development Standards, the California Common Core Standards, and use the English Language Arts, English Language Development Framework, along with other important books and research important to the development of this curriculum. Next slide, please. The curriculum follows an arc of learning, as you see on this slide, and we know that this is going to help engage, prepare, and more importantly, challenge our students' thinking, which is precisely what our federal program orders require. The curriculum goes even further to also align to our meta through lines, which are having an assets orientation, culturally and linguistically sustaining, and providing multiple perspectives, as you can see here on this slide. Next. So our adoption timeline outlined here was somewhat hampered due to our school closures in March. And so now our adjusted adoption timeline now shows our pilot beginning this past August. And you can see that since then, our teachers have received additional teacher coaching. We are in the midst of a public review process, which commenced this past month. This month, we've hosted one webinar already for families, and we will be hosting yet another one tomorrow for all of our emergent multilingual learners, grades 5 through 12. Finally, we will bring this plan to you for recommendation for adoption at our next board meeting, and would be happy to answer any questions you may have about this curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lares-Horton. Any questions or comments? I have a question. I just want to ask you to maybe describe something specific that you're excited about, that's new about this. And I know how detail oriented you are. And so I just want to fill in the picture for myself.
Yes.
You could.
I would love to. You know, in prior years, if you were to walk into one of these classrooms, you would have found our students using adaptive software that was teaching them just, you know, basic skills. And I can share with you one instance in which I visited a classroom and students actually handed me a letter saying, please, please get rid of this curriculum. I was quite shocked, but actually, no, I wasn't quite shocked. It was because our students want to be able to read interesting literature. They want to be able to connect with it, have discussions, make meaning, and transfer that to English. That is what research tells us works. And so I'm really excited to say that the curriculum is engaging. It also is provided to students in their first language, so they can first make that meaning that is necessary to gain access to that rigorous thinking. So I'm excited. I know that it's a very heavy lift for our teachers, and we are here to support them in the best way possible as we implement this very new curriculum.
Thanks for filling that in. And Dr. Reed, I'm going to go to our two public speakers first before coming back around to the rest of the board. Thank you, Ms. Lares-Horton. Mr. Hio.
Yes, we have two speakers for this item. So I will start with Moni DeWitt and Roseanne Crawford. Moni.
Thanks again, Sandra. So yes, I do find dual language immersion an important thing to study, but I have noticed that the money is coming out of LCAP, and I know that public advocates from San Francisco had sent a complaint to Matsuoko before that he didn't use the LCAP money appropriately. And so my question to you is two. One is it the most effective use? And is it okay to pull it out of LCAP? And my second question is, it looks interesting, but I would love to see data. Like, I don't know if it's so new that we don't know anybody who's used it, but how do we know this is going to be successful? And I think we really need to ask that question and have some numbers of where it's been used and see what the outcomes are, because short of that, we're could be spinning our wheels, and our students deserve to get a good education. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker is Roseanne Crawford.
Hi, I'm here. Thank you. It appears that this is meta repackaged. I'm concerned about the deficiency of the English learners in learning English with the proposed meta ideological model. As a taxpayer and concerned citizen, I question why this ideological concept with no track record in Santa Barbara is being introduced as a program. We have 2 bilingual schools at both Franklin Elementary and Adelante. Elementary, the Franklin has great scores. Adelante is struggling with their proficiency, but they're coming up. There has been no attempt to replicate the success of the higher performing schools and create some standardization in all schools. So there's been no tracking. Using our kids as political experiments just to get new funding revenue is one reason why people are beginning to question the leadership of this board. Lastly, the vote to support this program was pushed through in COVID during a few Zoom meetings that were limited in participation, mostly stakeholders. This should be reconsidered or put on hold until the process is inclusive of parents that can meet in workshop groups to carefully examine this suggested direction. The parents most affected are those that don't have Zoom as a tool for use as participation, and they are tired of being excluded by this board. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And President Capps, that concludes public comment.
Thank you to our speakers. Dr. Reed.
Yeah, I want to thank Ms. Maria Larios Horton for her explanation. And I would like to sort of speak a little bit broadly about the impetus and reasoning behind Meta and the Meta plan, is that we need to really look at literacy from a lot of angles. Literacy is not just, we do need to be concerned about dyslexia. We need to be concerned about phonics. We need to be concerned about our literacy focus, and we need a more comprehensive plan. And that is something that we need to do a deeper dive in. But we also need to understand that for students to engage in curricula, whether it be math or literacy or music or art, that it needs to be culturally relevant to the students, because that is indeed the reasoning and evidence that we see in research, and what we are working towards here is ensuring that we have engagement of all students in the curricula, whether they be persons with disabilities, whether they be from a certain ethnicity, whether they're an ELD emergent learner, whether they be a student who is a GATE student, a high achiever. We need to be looking at all aspects. So when we think about literacy, literacy is around looking at how can we engage all of our students in a culturally relevant way. So I would put it back to a question to Ms. Larios Horton, because the Meta plan, and even as we develop plans to ensure that we're engaging all of our students in the most effective way, we need to often regroup, be nimble, revise, and reframe. And perhaps Ms. Larios Horton can sort of explain why we are in this situation currently and why she sees this as a benefit potentially for our students going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. And I think a lot about how much this pandemic has really hampered our ability to truly explain our Meta plan. Meta is not a program. Meta is a set of guiding principles based on multiple pages of research in our Meta plan around how we need to approach all aspects and facets of education for all students, and in particular, emergent multilingual learners. So Meta is not just dual language immersion. Meta is not just teaching students in their first language only and solely. Meta is about all things related to classroom environments, culturally and linguistically sustaining curriculum, as you spoke about earlier. And so through those lenses, we approach the education of our students, and again, in particular, our emergent multilingual learners. For this particular report, we're speaking about emergent multilingual learners who are newcomers to our school, less than 3 years, numbering only a little over 100 students. And this curriculum represents an English class and an English language development class based on multiple theories and research proven methodologies. And so it is only one aspect of the education we must provide to our emergent multilingual learners. We are out of compliance. And so this curriculum allows us to align to compliant or to requirements asked of us by a recent federal program audit. So this curriculum best suits our students because it is not a canned curriculum that doesn't necessarily ask teachers to work page by page in a textbook. It really asks us to think about the students who are in front of us, adapt the curriculum as best as we can through the support of our instructional support specialists and our coaching consultants from West Ed. We have so much to discuss about our Meta plan, but again, I just want to loop back around to making sure we don't conflate Meta with just dual language immersion. It is more than that. And so I appreciate though, because I always say bad news is good information. The fact that our community needs additional information or clarification is information for me. So thank you so much for the question. I hope I answered it for you.
Yes, and just to add to that, with the LCAP funds, I mean, that is the specificity around LCAP is to fund work around this. And this is the reasoning why LCAP was suggested and brought forward in the first place from the state, was so that we could meet the criteria to ensure our emergent learners, our ELD learners, our newcomers are getting sufficient scaffolding to support their educational achievement.
Thank you. Yes, and I would like to make a clarification that the curriculum adaptations that are being presented to you we did not use LCAP funding simply because these are core instructional materials. So we used instructional materials funding to support this implementation. So I just want to make that clear that we did not use LCAP funds to fund a core program of instruction.
So this is clearly something that is a specificity around what we need to be doing in our curriculum work to support our emergent newcomer learners. And we have additional funds from LCAP to support and to provide the additional funding where we need to go deeper dive in supporting our students of color. Thank you. I just think this transparency is so important. Yes. And you know, what you actually were defining is this is a small group of students, but every student counts in this district. And we need to ensure that every student, whether they be a newcomer or a gate achiever or a middle of the line student or whatever student they are, that we are making sure that we're providing scaffolding and opportunities for all students to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Sims-Mountain.
just have a quick question. How does Meta support reclassification of students, or are they two separate things?
Well, Meta speaks to reclassification in one of our chapters. So the Meta plan also speaks to all of those requirements, such as reclassification. And our goal is to reclassify students. And what I would like to say about that, Ms. Sims-Moten, is that we aim to reclassify students. But what we don't want to do is ask students to forego their first language in order to obtain a second language. So you don't have to give up your first to obtain your second. So that is what might be a little different with regard to our Meta plan. And I hope that answers your question.
It does. I just wanted to bring that to the attention because often we hear about reclassification, and so we're talking about this program, and they're just trying. Are they related? But I appreciate you saying that it's not to lose your native language to learn another one, but there's also that reclassification that's really. I think we talked about it quite a bit last year, and how we were doing it, or the fact that we weren't reclassifying them in a more in a manner that we should have been. So I appreciate your answer.
Yeah, sorry, go for it.
Oh, thanks a lot. First of all, this is a tried and true course. It's not new. It's not a fling or, just an offhanded decision. I really admire, and I'm very excited about this course and this offering for the students, just providing that bridge for really meaningful instruction in reading and writing. And I had a chance to look at a few of the modules, and in addition to the description that you provided, the modules really remind you of all of the ways that you can incorporate pre-reading activities and moving all the way from pre to post and informal and formal writing assignments. I'm delighted, and I'm really grateful we're doing this.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Ms. Munoz.
Yes, I'm also excited and appreciative of your presentation, Ms. Labios Horton, about the quality reading and writing and, discussion to help students in terms of the analysis, leading to social issues and the bigger questions with quality material for inquiry by our students, and preparing them for the future, so that it's a high caliber educational curriculum. And it's very, I'm very excited and would love to learn more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz. I think that might wrap us up here, just as this discussion. So then we'll bring it back for a vote. I think we're ready for that. Thank you so much. Okay, that brings us to the end here. The remaining items, any coming events we need to discuss? Probably not. And I know Dr. Reed has an idea for a future agenda item, so I will turn it to you.
Thank you. I think in light of the many emails we have received over the last weekend and certainly last week, but just really in general, when issues come forward that are very vital and needing prudent listening and being very aware of what people are asking and being able to hear that, I think we don't necessarily have a process that is transparent to the community as to how we respond to emails that come forward to us. I know that when I'm addressed an email personally, that I take it on myself to respond to that email. But, and I know that when I was past president at one point, there was another processes in place such that the president of the board responded as the cohesive response to the group who emailed, or in other words, responded for the group as a board to the email that was sent to the board. I don't know as if there is a transparency of a process that we are doing currently and what that looks like. And I'd like to be able to bring that as an agenda item to discuss as to what is the best approach to ensure that our community is getting the responses from the board in a way that is receptive to what they're asking, and how we can be transparent about that process.
Great.
So in a long-winded way, I'd like to talk about, can we talk about this at the next board meeting, the processes that we do to ensure that our message, that we are responding to the messages that we're getting from our public.
Sounds good to me. We can't do it now. It's not on the agenda, but thank you for raising it. Okay, any other topics to add? And you can certainly always email about future agenda items. Okay, then let's talk about the next meeting, which is Tuesday, October 27th at 6:30 p.m. There we go. And with that, we're up for adjournment. Oh, Ms. Sims-Moton.
Ms. Kev, just on the same frame of process, you know, we've had some questions and several emails asked when we were coming back together as a board, so we might want to think about what that looks like and what the timeline for us to get back online.
Yes, I would like to ask Superintendent Maldonado to guide us in returning us to in-person meetings in consultation with Susan Klein Rothschild, because of course we need to do that so that we don't have to wait for a board meeting to determine that conversation in public. Because again, for anyone who's still watching, as a board, we can only discuss things as the five of us in public, which is what we do. And so Superintendent Maldonado, if you could provide a recommendation as to when and how we resume our meetings in the boardroom, I'd appreciate that.
I will take care of that and work with Public Health Department to provide the appropriate guidelines.
Thank you.
For all of us.
Ms. Capps?
Yes, Ms. Ford.
Just to underscore that being important, but also Susan Salcido is on top of that, and each one of the county, the school boards in the county is waiting for the word from her also.
Great. Okay, let's not discuss too much, but thank you so much for that. And with that, I am going to move us to item M, which is adjournment at 10:23. And thanks to all involved, and have a good night. I'm pushing on my gavel. Thanks everybody. Sleep well. Be safe, be healthy, wear a mask.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
One that's still on there.
We see you public, we see you teachers, we see you parents, we see you community. Thank you.
Thank you.